But will the French agree to these plans?
Also this morning, how do we get young people into work? The unemployment rate is twice as high for young people compared to the adult population. A new parliamentary report says urgent action is needed to tackle the problem.
By now, hot deals, it's Black Friday. Now, while you might be able to bag a bargain, are these sales at the expense of small businesses and the environment?
A very good morning to you. We start with that new COVID variant found in Botswana, South Africa and Hong Kong. It's been named by officials as the worst one we've seen so far.
Well, the variant has mutated to a point that scientists just haven't seen before, and it's feared to be more transmissible and has the potential to evade immunity. In response, travellers arriving to England from 6 southern African countries will have to quarantine from midday today, with flights also being temporarily banned.
Paul Giles is a CEO of travel consultancy firm, the PC Agency. Paul, a very good morning to you. Just first of all, your reaction to this new variant.
I hope this is a false alarm. It's the last thing that the travel industry needs right now. It's the last thing the economy needs. Clearly, the government has to be seen to be acting swiftly when it gets information like this, which causes it concern. But there haven't been any cases found in the UK. It is early days in Botswana and South Africa in terms of raising the alarm, and let's see how this develops. We've been here before with the so-called Nepal variant, which turned out to be nothing, and the variant that affected mink, which turned out to be nothing. And I'm a little concerned that the government's acted far too swiftly in terms of banning flights, which is the last thing the travel industry certainly needs.
Although I'm told that compared to those variants that you mentioned, this variant has a lot more mutations, hence they're trying to get ahead of the curve.
Yes, and that's understandable, and they've learned the lesson from earlier in the pandemic by not acting quickly, so that is certainly encouraging. But I think there should be other ways in which they deal with alarms and alerts like this, rather than simply imposing blanket measures on countries and stopping flights completely. Surely it's better to be assessing individual risk. So why should the UK government be treating individuals who've been fully jabbed in the same way as those who haven't been fully jabbed by expecting everybody to go into hotel quarantine from this Sunday in England or this Saturday in Scotland? It needs to be a different system because we're going to be living with variants for some time, and we can't have this constant in-out approach of banning flights, affecting thousands of people's planned business or leisure trips, and causing this sort of concern and chaos. As you've seen, share prices in Asia have fallen sharply overnight on the back of these worries. So there are other ways the government could act.
I think one thing the government are particularly worried about is that this variant, the vaccines may not be so successful in combating it. Therefore, the travel industry is going to have to learn, to some degree, to just have to be flexible to when these measures come down.
Well, clearly health is a priority. It's very difficult to argue against, and that's why we need to see how this develops. But the travel industry can't be at the whim of governments who simply stop flights at a moment's notice or a few hours' notice and then bring back old policies such as hotel quarantine, which I thought we'd moved on from. Treatments are so much better. Testing is so much better. Surely quarantine people at home rather than force them to pay over £2,000 each to spend 11 nights in hotel quarantine. So I think governments need to find other methods, because by simply banning flights and restricting movement, that's causing more damage to jobs, to the economy, and of course that in turn creates more health problems in other ways.
How many people do you think this is going to impact, and particularly their Christmas plans? I guess we don't know how long these measures are going to be in place. We know it's 6 countries where flights have been suspended, and on a daily basis now we're seeing about sort of 500, 700 people arriving back from South Africa to the UK.
Yes, of course, what we've seen in the last few weeks is recovery in the sector. We have seen tour operators and travel agents get back to something like 80% of sales that they saw pre-pandemic. There was a big recovery underway since the government removed countries from the red list and abandoned hotel quarantine during October. So lots of people booked immediately in October and in early November for the US when that opened up. So we've seen a gradual recovery, a very encouraging recovery over the last few weeks. And many people are going to be stuck in South Africa. If you're British trying to get back, there are now no flights non-stop back to the UK because they've been banned from today. The last arrivals will arrive in about an hour at Heathrow. And then how do you get home? So it's going to affect thousands of people who bought tickets in the knowledge that South Africa and Botswana and others had come off the red list. And it's very difficult for them to get home now because there are very few flights, even indirectly, back to the UK in time before hotel quarantine is due to kick in this weekend. So sadly, there will be many people who either have to take the decision to launder their status, if you like, for 2 weeks in another country and then come back to the UK, or they're going to have to pay for hotel quarantine. So it leaves thousands of people really stranded or facing huge bills who are currently in southern Africa.
Paul, really good to have your thoughts this morning. Thank you so much, travel consultant Paul Charles there from the PC agency. Just to give you the 6 countries in total that are on that list then. South Africa, which I would have thought would be the country that sees the most travel from the UK, big South African population in the UK, especially in London. Namibia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Lesotho and Eswatini. Flights from there suspended from midday.
If you are impacted, particularly if maybe you had Christmas plans and you booked to go somewhere there, or maybe you've got friends, family currently in one of those countries concerned about getting back, please do get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Holiday cancelled, family stuck, email us gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Right, let's bring you up to date at 7 minutes past 6 this morning with the latest on the crisis in the Channel. Boris Johnson has told the French President Emmanuel Macron that British border officials could begin patrols in northern France as soon as next week. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is heading to Calais on Sunday, as are other officials to Paris. They're heading there for talks. The Prime Minister says British vessels could also operate in French waters, as he told the French President that, in his words, we must go further and faster together to deal with the problems.
Some of the other plans include deploying more advanced technology like sensors and radar, reciprocal maritime patrols in each other's territorial waters and airborne surveillance, deepening the work of the country's joint intelligence cell, immediate work on bilateral returns agreement with France, effectively the UK saying to France that you've got to take these people back, and talks to establish a UK-EU returns agreement. Well, let's head to Paris to find out more. Journalist Peter Allen joins us. Look, this is all very well. Boris Johnson, Priti Patel, they come up with their 5-point plan. How much of it's actually going to stick with the French and they'll say, OK, we'll accept that?
I think very little is going to stick with the French. The principle is all right. Cooperation, new technology, better technology, putting more money into this appalling problem, this fatal problem. But if you look at a lot of the details in Boris Johnson's letter, I think journalists saw it before Emmanuel Macron did. It was clearly designed for a far wider constituency than simply the French government. This idea that the sovereignty of the French Republic can be threatened, let's use that word, by British security forces working right across that huge stretch of coastline. It's not just a few beaches around Calais. We're looking at the main sort of beach area. It's around 100 miles. We can even stretch right down into Normandy and beyond. This, again, this idea that the French security services can't cope with patrolling their own country. Yes, you can argue, of course, that they're failing to stop these boats leaving, but it's an incredibly difficult job. What do you do? Let's say you have a 25-mile stretch of coastline. Do you have 2,000, 3,000 security personnel there all night long? Of course, that's absolutely impossible. Boris Johnson seems to make out that it's all about boots on the ground, this idea that you can have all these sort of old-fashioned patrols marching up and down. The French would say that's absolutely ridiculous. It's far, far more complex than that. It's not just a question of pouring personnel onto these beaches. So the simple answer is no, of course, the French Republic is not going to allow this to happen, in my opinion.
The difficulty is we see pictures of the French just watching on, it seems, in some cases, as more migrants get onto boats and don't do anything. So what power does Boris Johnson actually have to say, you know, come on, France, we actually need you to take some action?
Well, I have to say that if, for example, British security services were on French beaches in exactly the same position as these vast French security services, if there's one thing you learn about France very, very quickly when you're based here is that security services are absolutely massive. They have plenty of personnel to direct when needed. But the idea that British security personnel wouldn't be constrained by the law, by the intervention of human rights lawyers, human rights groups, or whatever, there's more than just security involved in all this. There's all kinds of considerations for the welfare of these migrants. Again, the idea is you can say, look, we don't want people drowning at sea. Of course you don't want people drowning at sea. You don't want small boats going into the water. Everybody would be agreed on that. But stopping it is not as easy as just putting the military, police, whatever, onto the beach to arrest people. Yes, there has been this argument that police were watching. Perhaps there's more to that situation than we saw in those pictures. There have been arguments, which I've seen, that the boats were already in the water when the police arrived. We could argue about all these situations all day long. But I speak to a lot of French security forces all the time operating on that coastline. The job is far, far harder than is made out. The idea that brute force can just solve the whole thing is simply not the case.
Peter, there's not a lot of... well, I've heard that a lot of these migrants, they tend to be on the other side of the border, on the other side of France, and then they're brought across the border from the Netherlands, from Belgium, etc. And then in the last sort of 24 hours before they depart, then they head for the coast, for the Calais coast. Has there been any talk about how to secure the border on the other side of France?
Well, that's an excellent point there, Paul. The point is, so many of the migrants are being brought in from countries like Belgium, Germany even. Germany is seen as a real sort of hub for migrants who want to get to Britain. And as you say, they come in the early hours of the morning or late at night, and the boats are brought in with them as well, and they go straight across. How do you secure that? I mean, it's the EU. The whole point is, for years, there's been movement towards open borders. It's all about, inevitably, it's about free trade. There's all these considerations to think about. We live in free countries. We live in countries where people want to travel. They want to travel to Britain. They want to travel from Belgium to France, whatever. How on earth are we going to secure these borders to the extent that you say to certain people, look, you may well be trying to get to Britain in the morning. We're not going to allow you across. It's really, really difficult. Again, France considers itself one of the great countries of human rights. I saw a parliamentary report last week, which was released by the French Parliament, saying the migrants are being treated extremely badly in France. And they should be allowed to move around more. They should be allowed more accommodation. They should be allowed better conditions. How you reconcile that with sort of stopping them from doing what they want, which includes trying to get to Britain to get their asylum tested. They're allowed to do that according to international law. And so there's a hugely complex issue. And again, this idea that brute force is the sort of solution to it all is going to be very hard to self-defend.
It's a really complex problem, Peter. So there's not going to be any sort of silver bullet solution. Really good to get your thoughts on that this morning, Peter. That is our correspondent in Paris, Peter Allen.
It's 6:15. Let's give you an overview of what else is making the headlines today. And French fishermen are planning to block the Channel Tunnel and the port of Calais tomorrow over the ongoing licensing row with the UK. Now, Downing Street says the government has contingency plans in place in case of disruption to supplies, and the French are demanding more rights to fish in British waters.
Tony Blair has called on the Labour Party to reject wokeism and push its far-left factions to the margins if it wants to get into government again. The former Prime Minister says he believes the party has a culture problem with many working-class voters, as well as a credibility problem with those in the centre of the political spectrum. We'll be talking some more about this later on in the programme.
An independent NHS body that's set up to tackle health inequalities has committed to avoiding using what they've described as blanket acronyms such as BAME. Well, the NHS Race and Health Observatory found that such terms are not representative actually erase identities and fail to appreciate the nuance of ethnic inequality in the UK.
In sport, it wasn't a good night for Spurs, who had a shocker after going down to 10 men. The London club lost 2-1 to one of the lowest-ranked sides, in fact, I think the lowest-ranked sides in the Europa League, Slovenian side NS Mura. It leaves their chances of qualifying for the last 16 hanging by a thread.
It was better news elsewhere in London as West Ham qualified for the Europa League last 16. They won 2-0 in their Group H match in Austria.
Also, Leicester's resurgence continued as they topped their Europa League group after a 3-1 victory over Legia Warsaw.
And today's weather. Rain is clearing south, then it's going to be colder with sunny spells and scattered heavy showers, becoming very windy across western and northern areas with stormy conditions for parts of north and east Scotland with some heavy snow for high ground.
I hear it's going to be very, very, very cold in that wind this weekend. Strong winds and it'll feel like freezing out there. So definitely it's time to wrap up. It's gone on long enough, the warm weather for this time of year.
It's going to be a cold snap for about 7 days, apparently, and then maybe get a little bit warmer as we head into December and Christmas. Now, Tony Blair's made these comments, of course, the former Prime Minister, leader of the Labour Party, saying that it's gone too woke, that it really needs to sort of shake off the more extreme left-wing fringe parts of the party, otherwise it's just never going to be electable.
Yeah.
Do you think that's right? Has he got the right perspective, the right sort of handling, the right grip on the Labour Party? And are his comments that relevant anymore?
Yeah. I guess we're asking, do you think Tony Blair's right? And does the Labour Party need to get rid of the wokeism and, as he says, kind of come more towards the centre and away from the far left? Be really interested to know whether that would maybe make you think about voting for the Labour Party. Of course, by-elections on the way as well, which will give us a little bit of a flavour of how the electorate's feeling. So it's important. So do let us know how you feel about that at GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can drop us a line on social media at GBNews.
Now, urgent action is needed to tackle the problem of youth unemployment, according to a new report by the House of Lords Youth Unemployment Committee. They say there need to be reforms to career guidance and further education funding, as well as new strategies to tackle discrimination and skills gaps. The report says COVID-19 was a perfect storm for youth unemployment, with 70% of job losses among the under-25s. Well, this follows a separate report that questions whether the government's Kickstart Scheme, introduced to help young people to get into work, is actually working.
Bill Balkett is a political reporter and a commentator with Young Voices UK. Bill, a very good morning to you. Do you recognise the problems that are cited in this report and what their recommendations are?
Absolutely. And there's some absolutely stark findings in there. I think it's nearly 500,000 young people are unemployed. I think it's the equivalent of around 11%, worse than many developed countries for that matter. You also have around 600,000 people that are not in education or in further education. Many of them, of course, were on the furlough scheme over the last 18 months. So it's a chronic issue. But the truth is that actually youth unemployment in this country particularly has been a persistent issue since the recession, with declining wages and also struggles to, as we're seeing, with problems with the labour market, shortage in skills, and also certain professions, particularly engineers. I think there's something like 20,000 shortage of engineers and also in other professions as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of recommendations from this Lord's report for the government to look at. There's also, at the same time, there's a report from the National Audit Office about the Kickstart Scheme, which was launched in September last year, designed to create 6-month work placements for young people on universal credit. And it's essentially saying that the scheme, it couldn't give enough assurances over whether it had actually helped enough young people into work, whether that was having any positive effects, and that actually some of the jobs that it did create, 100,000 jobs that it did create, could have been created anyway without the scheme, in effect rendering it a bit of a waste of money. What do you know about this Kickstart scheme, and do you think it's been effective enough?
Well, the Kickstart scheme, as you know, was introduced by Chancellor Rishi Sunak during the pandemic in order to bolster youth unemployment and to get them back onto the labour market. And as you said, it has been successful in some areas in creating, I think, around 150,000 jobs. And Rishi Sunak is extending the scheme until March. He announced it at the Conservative Party conference back in October. But as you said, there have been a lot of criticisms of the scheme as well, because even though what you're seeing with the market at the moment is that while there is shortages in many areas, I think there's around 1 million vacancies, young people are still having problems of navigating the market. It's very tough. I think on average it takes something like 100 job applications in order to just, get one job which you are desired to do and have the necessary skills for that. And I suppose the other issue that you have is with the skill shortage as well, and the labour with particular skills in certain areas of the economy, like STEM, and also the government trying to recognising that while Kickstart isn't the do-all and end-all, they're introducing other measures as well, like these new T levels, which are supposed to be replacing BTEC qualifications, which hopefully will get young people the necessary skills going forward for the future, but also have them have more work placements and also get that experience in the office as well.
Bill, you're speaking to this group, this generation, day in, day out. What do they want?
What do you want? What's the question, Rosie? I suppose the one thing they do, I suppose businesses in particular actually are very good when reaching out to young people. I think a quarter of them openly reach out to schools.
Is this a generation of people who are at home itching to go out to work? They want experiences, they want opportunity. Or is there a slight attitude problem where people think, not for me right now?
No, there's definitely a demand for, and young people are eager to get into the workplace. I mean, I just finished a master's, and I know that many people on my course are very eager to use the experience that they had on their journalism course in order to make their mark, in the workforce. But they just need that level of support. And I think there needs to be more of a recognition also from businesses as well, that the young bring creativity, they bring innovation, they bring high energy, and also just an understanding of emerging technologies. Because ultimately, and the report hints at this as well, is that a more diverse and dynamic workforce is a better workforce. We can't have the threat of having a lost generation in many ways, because in order for the economy to recover post-pandemic, you need that dynamic workforce, and you need young people to be playing a central role in that.
Yeah. Bill, just very quickly, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but this Lord's report also says a young people's commissioner should be appointed to champion the voice of those aged 16 to 24. Do you have any ideas? Doesn't have to be a politician. Who that would be? Who do you think young people look up to?
Who do young people look up to in particular? I think one person in particular, actually, I really like, who's been speaking a lot in the news, is Martin Lewis, the founder and editor, money saving expert. Often, gives a lot of good advice when it comes to financial management, which I think young people need going forward, and they need that support. And I think he would be a good figurehead to kind of maybe lead that. And as we see, there is an independent young persons commissioner, I think, for children. So it would be great to see someone in that role as well.
Interesting suggestion, Bill. Really appreciate your time. Thank you. That's Bill Bowcutt there, who represents Young Voices. It's
25 minutes past 6. We're here until 9 this morning. Still to come, we're taking a look at what's making the front pages of the papers, but extra weather with Alex.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. Storm Arwen is arriving today and lasting overnight and into tomorrow. There's going to be very strong winds, damaging gusts in places, and for some a bit of snow as well. That's because the storm system is coming in from the north, so it's bringing with it cold air. But it's really the winds that are the greatest cause for concern, really picking up later today across northern Britain, but also down the west side. The winds will strengthen through the evening and overnight. So it's a blustery day. It's a grey, wet start across the south, rain here, but increasingly across northern Scotland, snow showers packing in, accompanied by those strong and gusty winds. That's going to make for some pretty hazardous travelling conditions, especially later on, say, along the A9. Some brightness developing later over northern England, maybe Northern Ireland, but it's going to feel cold as those winds continue to strengthen. And those winds, as I said, are the greatest cause for concern. We have a yellow warning covering much of northern and western Britain through today. Gusts of 55 to 65 miles an hour could easily cause some disruption, certainly to ferries. And an amber warning for northern and eastern Scotland, parts of northeast England. Gusts here of 75 miles an hour. That could cause some structural damage. Certainly the potential for issues to power supplies along with travel disruption. And the snow will keep going for a while over northern Scotland. In fact, this zone of wet weather as it sinks south will chiefly be of rain, but we could easily see some snow from that down to relatively low levels for a time during the course of the night. Very strong winds continuing overnight across Wales, southwest England, along with the east coast. Also, it's going to be a cold night and a cold start to the weekend. Warnings remain in place into Saturday. Still that northerly wind and still this mixture of rain, sleet and snow pushing southwards. As I said, any snow at low levels not expected to stick around, but you could see some. Further wintry showers keep going across the east. Elsewhere it does turn drier, but it will be cold. All the details of the Met Office weather warnings are on the Met Office website.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast, just coming up to 6:30. Let's find out what's making the front pages this Friday morning, starting with The Independent, which reports Boris Johnson has rejected pleas to provide safe routes for refugees to reach the UK from Europe. This follows on from the deaths of 27 people attempting to cross the English Channel in an inflatable dinghy.
Let's move to The Telegraph. It leads with this absolutely heartbreaking tale, a husband who believes his wife drowned in the English Channel disaster. The Iraqi Kurd man claims his wife's GPS signal suddenly disappeared when he was tracking her across the sea.
The Guardian leads with South Africa and 5 more African countries being added to the red list as a new COVID variant poses a significant threat. The new variant feared to be more transmissible and has the potential to evade immunity.
That story is also on the front page of The Times. Their headline, variant halts travel to Africa. Ministers and scientists have become deeply concerned about the new variant that's been discovered in South Africa and Botswana.
Yeah, the Mirror has an exclusive on DIY death boats as 4 flimsy vessels were found on Dungeness Beach in Kent yesterday.
The Express headline claims UK troops are to patrol French beaches. We've heard already that France may not be too happy about this, in an effort to tackle the horrendous Channel crisis, which, as you know, had 27 people lose their lives in the Channel on Wednesday.
Yeah, the Mail reports that Boris Johnson has told Emmanuel Macron that he risks another Channel tragedy unless he stops blocking UK help to patrol French beaches. British boots could reportedly be on the ground in France as early as Monday.
On the front of the Metro, we just want to live like you. It's a quote from a 23-year-old Iraqi who was interviewed by the paper as one of the people vowing to make the perilous journey across the Channel despite the tragedy that we saw on Wednesday.
The Eye also focusing on issues in the Channel. I know the risk. This is my only way to reach England, the words of one would-be migrant.
Elsewhere, The Sun reports on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, saying the show cannot afford to lose any more big names after Richard Madeley was forced to pull out. They talk about Dame Marlene Phillips, her health. They're worried about her. DJ Naughty Boy, who's apparently seeking counselling.
Yeah, and finally, creative as always, there's a picture of Madonna on the front of the Star there. Someone's taken a picture of her. She's dropped her glasses under the bed. And that is the most important story in the world today, according to the Daily Star. Apparently, it sent the internet into meltdown.
Well, joining us in the studio to talk through maybe the more pressing stories of the day, journalist and broadcaster Petri Hoskin. Petri, really good to see you. You know, the front pages of most of the papers talking about Boris Johnson's plans, but his relationship with Macron quite testy at the moment, to have British boots in France.
Yeah, he's talking about British boots on the ground, which is normally a euphemism for the military, but it could be border forces instead. I think it's going to... I'm not entirely sure he means military boots on the ground. But what's interesting about this for me is that he is talking about this, not Priti Patel. And I said to you last week that Priti Patel is beginning to look weak. I mean, she is in the background of this, but this is Boris Johnson who is now, it's seemingly taking control of this crisis, which I don't think speaks very well for Priti Patel.
Well, she said yesterday, look, there's no quick fix.
Yeah, having said for how many weeks, I'm on top of this, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to sort this out. And her narrative now has completely changed. So I don't know what's going on the inside.
Well, reading between the lines, right, the suggestion is that British boots of some sort, not military, could be border force.
Yeah.
The suggestion is that Boris Johnson is going to say, we'll put them on the French beaches by Monday, right? What do you think the chances of the French saying that, bearing in mind how important sovereignty is?
Well, we can't do it without their express permission.
Yeah.
So, and is Macron going to give that permission?
So do you think Priti Patel's considered it and she thought, I'm not going to bother floating that idea because it's never going to be a non-starter, and Boris Johnson thought, yeah, it probably isn't going to be a non-starter, but it'll look good if I'm saying it?
Yeah, well, I think he has grabbed this narrative, and that is, it's all, I mean, look, the optics of this, it's all about the politics.
Political manoeuvring.
Yeah, it's political manoeuvring. And it's so sad, really, that they're using this tragedy to do that. And they were all talking about, these terrible deaths, which, of course, they are terrible. But they seem to be political pawns. You know, this is an issue that hasn't been dealt with, seemingly can't be dealt with. So now they're saying, oh, our main concern is that no more people die in the Channel. And it's almost like guilting, trying to guilt Macron, trying to guilt Boris Johnson or Priti Patel into doing something that they wanted to do anyway. And they're using these deaths as a sort of, oh, we're so heartbroken about these deaths, let's stop the Channel crossings to stop the deaths. But my gut feeling is it's like this is a reason, this is an excuse that we can actually stop it.
Yeah.
It feels
what it feels like.
Absolutely tragic that if 27 people died and we can't come up with a solution, you wonder, well, what would engineer?
What would? I mean, and this was going to happen.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
We've been saying it for ages.
This was going to happen.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, what a shock.
And ultimately could happen again today, or could have happened again yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're talking about, actually this time, British troops in Germany.
Well, we're talking about British tanks in Germany. There's no plan to return to putting troops in Germany. And they're starting in Sennelager in Germany, and they're going to be putting tanks there. Now, it doesn't say how many tanks, and it doesn't say what other equipment will be placed in Germany. But this is saber-rattling at Russia. This is to make sure that Russia knows that there is the military hardware across Europe, or at least in Germany, to prevent any land invasion that Russia might make. Now, Russia's big on land.
Land invasion into where?
Anywhere into Europe.
Right.
So that they can be. This is so.
Is that really going to happen?
Well, Russia has got a massive land army. It's got a massive amount of tanks. It's really big. I mean, although it does cyber as well, it has these. It really does have the biggest, I think, at the moment, military hardware, landware, tanks, guns, the old-fashioned war stuff, and everywhere else, as we know, getting rid of them. I mean, we've done it. You know, there's no European army, which has been fought against. But this is an interesting move. But like I said, it's not going to be troops. There will be a rotating force going through and driving the tanks around and using them for exercise to keep them battle ready. But there's no sign of troops returning to Germany in the way that they were.
Right, wow, amazing. Tanks in Germany and potentially British boots in France.
Yeah, well, it sounds familiar. Let's not go there.
No,
let's move to something perhaps a little lighter. Women taking male roles. What's happening?
Yes, this is an MP who's defended through a tweet his suggestion, because it was International Men's Day, and Nick Fletcher, Tory MP, did suggest as part of the problem that we're seeing young men turn to crime is that he mentioned Doctor Who is now a woman. And saying that, you know, the debate over 007 perhaps being a woman, the equaliser now being Queen Latifah, a woman as against a man. He's saying that boys don't have good role models.
And so they turn to crime.
That they turn to crime. The thing about this that seems to me to be utterly ridiculous is there are so few very strong, I mean, it's improving, but strong female role models. And they've always been, well, Doctor Who was a man up until Jodie Whittaker.
Yeah.
I think that crime hasn't gone up since she took over.
Yeah.
As an
So
MP,
it just seems to be a very strange.
We've got a male prime minister. He could be acting as a brilliant role model.
We've pretty
certainly
much always had a male prime minister.
Yeah.
All superheroes are male.
Yeah.
Footballers.
Yeah.
Been male for a long time.
Yeah.
Where else? Genuinely, I'm struggling to think what he means, huh?
There are some female role models. I think we need to stick up for them a little bit. But
there's no lack of male role models.
Cause crime is really bizarre.
Yeah,
it is a very strange statement. I
Weird.
think. I mean, I don't like to be fair to politicians of any persuasion, but he probably was saying that we just need to make sure that all the characters on the television male ones aren't criminals, which I think is bizarre, but and also shut up. I mean,
Saying it straight. The front page of The Sun this morning decided to take one pop star's. We can't see her face, but we know who it is.
we do now.
Yeah.
We recognise her. Madonna, 63 years old. Now, I'm really confused by this story as far as I'm concerned, because I accept I'm trying to perhaps make her have thought about this in a more intelligent way than she did. But perhaps she's trying to say, you know, women of all age can be sexy and vibrant and have something to say in the world, because often women, once they reach 50, they become invisible. And they become invisible on television, they become invisible in film, they become invisible in the media as such, because youth is the thing. So maybe she's making a statement about a 63-year-old woman not being invisible, or she's just showing off.
Do we know why she said she did it?
No, I mean, she's just crossed that it's been pulled from Instagram because she was showing a nipple. But they have very strict rules on that. The image of her under the bed, she's got a very fine bottom.
That's why she posted it, isn't it?
Of course she did. She didn't lose her glasses under the bed, of course not. But it's a very bizarre image. There it is there, you can see it's been delicately...
She went under there to get the glasses.
Well...
Is that right?
No, of course not. Of course not.
It's all
completely staged and completely ridiculous.
It's a bit weird. What's weirder, that story or the MP who thinks that there aren't enough male role models?
Well, I think this talks to female role models, doesn't it? I don't know. I don't know which is weirder. Look, you know, like I said, I hope it's because she's trying to suggest that women shouldn't be invisible once they reach a certain age. I hope.
Yeah.
But I do suspect it's just a case of her getting her nipples out and showing off her bum.
And you don't necessarily need to put fishing nets on and sort of clamber under the bed and be...
Listen.
I do that every time I go home.
Yeah, do you?
Yes.
Right, OK. Listen, before because you're coming back in the next hour with more paper stories, aren't you? Can you find out what this front page of The Star, it says, official Cats are Psychos, page 9.
Oh, yeah, I've read it.
You've read it?
Yeah, and I'll bring it in
back
next time.
And tell us more about that.
Because my cat is a blimmin' psycho.
Yeah, well, there you go. OK,
Petri, thank you very much for joining us. Journalist and broadcaster will be back on the programme a little bit later. It is coming up to 6:45.
Yep, still to come this morning, we'll bring you all of today's business news, including a huge investment being put into a steelworks on Teesside. All that to come after this.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
It's 6:45. Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast this morning with Paul and Rosie. Now, Teesside steel company Paraloy has secured a £15 million funding package, enabling it to fulfil more exports than it has in its 90-year history.
The money is from Santander UK, supported by the government's UK Export Finance, which provides export credit. Our cameras join the Tees Valley Mayor Ben Houchen for a private tour of the Middlesbrough facility. And as our North East of England reporter Rachel Sweeney tells us, this is very good news for local people.
A team of 350 working from 3 factories producing high-end metal for a global market. This is Paraloy. A £15 million funding package enables Paraloy to fulfil the most exports in its 90-year history, with shipments to North America, the Middle East and Asia Pacific. But it's Teesside at the heart of the operation.
Teesside has a rich history of metal, in the past, we've had a long history of the right kind of skills in the area. It is a concern that we invest more in skills and training in the years to come with all the work that's going on. We've got over 30-odd vacancies right now in the business, so we are really keen on developing that side of the business. But the Teesside area has a good mix of fabrication, welding, machining, and all that kind of metallurgically related products.
They've opened 2 additional sites and recruited more than 70 new staff so far. They're still looking for another 35 people, but will the jobs go to locals?
95% of everybody we bring in is regional, so from Newcastle down to sort of the North Yorkshire areas, and that sort of catchment area is where most people come from. I just love the frankness and the hard work ethic of the northern region. So it's been a great move for us.
The northeast of England is truly a fascinating place to be at the moment. We are seeing record deals from businesses right across the globe. People want to set up camp right here on Teesside and across the northeast. It is stabilising our local economy. It is bringing in jobs, and the Paraloy deal is just one more cherry on the cake. The Tees Valley Mayor Ben Houchen has been visiting the site, and he says this is only great news for the people who live here.
Well, it's incredible. I want more businesses like Paraloy in Teesside. I mean, they are doing some fantastic stuff, and it's great to see them access the UK Export Finance. So any business out there that is looking to export in the amazing way that Paraloy does right here, then they need to access that, because it's allowed them to take on more orders, be able to access new markets, grow their business, but also more importantly as well, grow their headcount, create jobs, but good quality, well-paid jobs, the types of jobs we need in this area.
From a low-wage service sector economy to an area thriving on high skills and global exports, the world is watching Teesside.
That's our North East of England reporter Rachel Sweeney there.
Well, let's get some more business stories now. There's no escaping that it is Black Friday today and what sort of deals you can get. We'll talk about that in a second, but joining us is business and finance commentator Michael Wilson. Michael, I'm really sorry to do this and to bring it up, but, you said last week you had a holiday plan to South Africa. Has that been scuppered by today's news?
I'm not sure. I'm waiting to see. I've just been just before I came on air, actually, just looking on the official on the government website, just to see. It looks like what's happening is that flights from various southern African countries, including South Africa, when they come into the UK, are forced into some kind of isolation, and it's not quite clear what that is right now. It might be hotels, it might be 10 days staying somewhere, but actually going out there, the advice looks exactly the same as it did before, which is actually to get your PCR test less than 72 hours before you go, and take a number of copies to give to immigration officials when you get there. So I'm still actually waiting to see whether or not it's going to happen. We'll have to make a decision, today. But like lots of other people, there's a lot to unravel, obviously people will lose a great deal of money on this, I would imagine.
Yeah, so frustrating.
Yeah, very frustrating. It is Black Friday today, I presume, Michael. We're being warned about dud deals.
We are, yes. I mean, Which has done quite a big survey about this. There's a lot of deals. Apparently, there will be more spending at the moment. Of £8.7 billion as opposed to 7.8 spent in 2019. That's obviously before the pandemic. Last year's spending was nothing like it at all. The Which advice covers things like televisions, laptops, washing machines, freezers, and all the rest of it. They've found some real duds there. I mean, the fact of the matter is that manufacturers and retailers, it seems to me, from what I've been seeing, are finding it really difficult to offer discounts on big ticket items because they've lost so much money in the run up to all this because people simply haven't been shopping, that they're having to make decisions about it. So, and also, I mean, I as I said long before we actually did the story, I mean, my thought about it is, you know, if you can, hang on, because prices are not going to go up. I would imagine now would be the time with all the footfall that retailers are getting to keep the prices relatively high, even though there are some deals around. But I think afterwards, that's when the real deals will come because people want to shift stuff. I mean, that's what retailing is all about.
I've got a confession.
What's that?
I've bought a Black Friday deal already. Apparently 40% of us will do. So we like the allure of it, don't we?
9 out of 10 deals, according to which, are roughly about the same price as they were before Black Friday. I mean, if it's good quality, you've made a real saving, then good for you. But who am I to quarrel with which?
Yeah, you got a 1 in 10 chance then, and it's a good deal there.
Well, it's because some companies are doing these things where they do like a daily drop of a really hot deal. So maybe like a dress or a coat that you can buy for £10 rather than what normally would have been, you know, 150 or something.
Yeah.
So people are doing really creative things to get you in.
So have you got a little tent outside the various shops in your district then that you sort of go to on an hourly basis with a little primus stove?
Yeah.
And your kids all sort of Mum, I don't want to go in here anymore, all that stuff. Oh, good for you.
You've seen her, Michael. She's got a lot of time on her hands. Speaking of dud deals, the National Audit Office thinks this Kickstart scheme, which was meant to help young people get into work, that it may actually have not been as great as they envisaged. The government can't give assurances that the jobs it created actually wouldn't have been created anyway.
Okay, so what the government's saying is that this put 100,000 young people who were on universal credit into some kind of work. The questioning is what kind of work is it, and the questioning is about the quality of the work. I mean, I sympathise with both sides of this. I do, however, think though it's better to have some sort of work experience than to be sitting at home doing absolutely nothing. And it may be that some of these people who don't necessarily go into jobs that they would choose to, and I mean, who does when they start work, maybe getting some kind of work experience. I don't think you can knock that. I mean, yes, I get the point about the quality of the jobs being offered, but again, the question is what else was the government supposed to do? So we're talking about, never mind the quality, feel the width at the moment, aren't we? To take an old retail expression, and then we'll see about the quality of the jobs. But overall, I don't think it's any bad thing to get into work as soon as you can. But we'll see. These are the issues here, I think.
Yeah, one idea could be that young people could drive a truck for the Royal Mail.
They could. This is very interesting, actually. It's LGV drivers at Royal Mail. They're fast-tracking drivers with 1 or 2 years' experience and turning them into what they describe as excellent lorry drivers. It's all part of their driver academy. I mean, it's no bad thing. I think it adds to something else. You can ask governments to get involved in all this kind of work creation stuff. But as I think we've said on this programme before, it's really all down to the companies themselves. And we're going to talk about Majestic in the next bit, which I think is a prime example of this. But so far, she is not driving a big lorry, but she could be fairly soon. And indeed, if you were to apply with 1 or 2 years' experience, you might get onto quite a worthwhile job, because we know there's a shortage. And the only way that if there's a shortage and it's a worthwhile job, I suspect, and I can only sort of wonder about this, but I would think the only way up for wages is upwards.
Yeah. Michael, really good to get those stories this morning. Thank you. Michael Wilson there, business and finance commentator on the Great British Breakfast. And lots of you getting in touch with us on a variety of stories this morning, right?
Yeah, because we heard, Michael currently spent the morning before 7 o'clock trying to wrestle with the latest government changes to travel rules, because 6 countries' flights are going to be suspended for their flights arriving into the UK because there's concern about this new variant of coronavirus that scientists have said they think is going to be be even more transmissible than any variant we've seen before and potentially more vaccine resistant. And so now we've got this effectively new red list, 6 countries on it. We've been asking you how concerned you are about it.
Yeah, one viewer says not really concerned is the answer. I'm 52, healthy and so low risk. Concerned about the new completely out of proportion measures this will bring that cause more harm than the virus. The cure shouldn't be more harmful than the disease.
So the question is, was it right to impose those type of restrictions? Well, Dave says, well done the government, acting swiftly over the new variant. Selfish travel companies can whinge and whine, but UK security is imperative.
Yeah, Lee says not concerned at all. Also, good morning to you, Lee. Also, Johnny as well, not concerned about another variant to add to the other millions of coronavirus variants. Christopher isn't bothered either, but Lisa says more concerned about our so-called government.
The other story, talking about government that we've been discussing, is Tony Blair's comments that Labour must reject wokeism and push the extreme left to the margins if they want to get into power again.
Ditch woke and go for broke, I think is what he's saying there. Do you like what I did there? One viewer says, what's the point in a two-party political system if whatever way you vote, the result is the same? I'm no fan of wokeism, but isn't that what democracy is for, to have choices and everyone picks one?
Well, Martin says this is 100% right, but Labour will never see it. That's why I'll never vote for Labour again. We'll keep your views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Lots more to come this next hour, including how worried should we be about this new COVID variant? All that to come after the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. Storm Arwen is arriving today and lasting overnight and into tomorrow. There's going to be very strong winds, damaging gusts in places, and for some a bit of snow as well. That's because the storm system is coming in from the north, so it's bringing with it cold air. But it's really the winds that are the greatest cause for concern, really picking up later today across northern Britain, but also down the west side. The winds will strengthen through the evening and overnight. So it's a blustery day. It's a grey, wet start across the south. Rain here, but increasingly across northern Scotland. Snow showers packing in, accompanied by those strong and gusty winds. That's going to make for some pretty hazardous travelling conditions, especially later on, say, along the A9. Some brightness developing later over northern England, maybe Northern Ireland, but it's going to feel cold as those winds continue to strengthen. And those winds, as I said, are the greatest cause for concern. We have a yellow warning covering much of northern and western Britain through today. Gusts of 55 to 65 miles an hour could easily cause some disruption, certainly to ferries. And an amber warning for northern and eastern Scotland, parts of northeast England. Gusts here of 75 miles an hour. That could cause some structural damage. Certainly the potential for issues to power supplies along with travel disruption. And the snow will keep going for a while over northern Scotland. In fact, this zone of wet weather as it sinks south will chiefly be of rain, but we could easily see some snow from that down to relatively low levels for a time during the course of the night. Very strong winds continuing overnight across Wales, southwest England, along with the east coast. Also, it's going to be a cold night and a cold start to the weekend. Warnings remain in place into Saturday. Still that northerly wind and still this mixture of rain, sleet and snow pushing southwards. As I said, any snow at low levels not expected to stick around, but you could see some. Further wintry showers keep going across the east. Elsewhere it does turn drier, but it will be cold. All the details of the Met Office weather warnings are on the Met Office website.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Very good morning to you. You're watching The Great British Breakfast with Paul Hawkins and Rosie Wright. It's just gone 7 o'clock, and these are the stories making the headlines this Friday morning.
Now, concerns are really rising over a new COVID-19 variant that's been found in South Africa and Botswana. Officials say it's the worst one we've seen so far. Well, a travel ban will come into place today, suspending flights to the UK from 6 African nations. How worried should we be?
Also, the UK government wants British border officials to patrol northern France as soon as next week. It's part of Boris Johnson's plan to help tackle the number of people crossing the Channel. But will the French agree to it?
The former Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair is urging the party to reject wokeism and marginalise its far left if it ever wants to win power again. Is he right?
And we'll be on Teesside to tour a steel factory which has just secured £15 million worth of funding.
Well, a very good morning to you. Let's start with the update about that new COVID variant that's been found in Botswana, South Africa and Hong Kong. It's been named by officials as the worst variant we've seen so far. It's mutated to a point that scientists haven't seen before. It's feared to be more transmissible and has the potential to evade immunity.
In response, travellers arriving to England from 6 southern African countries will have to quarantine from midday today, with flights also being temporarily banned.
Well, we're joined now by travel expert Sally Gethin. Sally, a very good morning to you. We've just been speaking to our business and finance commentator Michael Wilson's got a trip to South Africa, and now he, like hundreds of other people, are plunged into this uncertainty again.
Yeah, we're plunged like back to the future, back to the red list, which all of us had hoped had gone forever. But the government did say when it got rid of the traffic light system that the red list would always be there as a safeguard, and here we are again. So, yeah, absolutely, a number of countries now placed back on the red list due to new variant. Government does not want to repeat the mistakes that it made over the Delta variant when it failed to close the borders with India early enough. So it's got off to an early start with this, caught a lot of people off guard, like you say, who were already booked or were planning to go to South Africa, already out there needing to come back. Now, this there's a flight ban coming in from midday today that is in force till 4 a.m. on Sunday morning. That gives the government time to stand up the hotels again for quarantine, so that any arrivals coming in from South Africa go straight to hotel quarantine from Sunday onward.
We were speaking to travel consultant Paul Charles earlier, and he was saying that the government's gone too far, too fast, too quickly, and that they really should have taken their time a bit more with this. What's your reading of it, Sally?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think that they were caught off guard the last time. So they're kind of being much more preemptive this time. So it's so hard to say, isn't it? They're going on the advice from the health experts working for government, the JCVI, for example. This isn't really a decision that's taken particularly in the Department for Transport, and probably is unlikely to have involved the travel trade sector as much this time around. Obviously, forward planning in the long term does involve the transport and the travel trade sector. The sad thing for the travel trade industry is, and all of us wanting to travel, is that this takes us back in a big way from where we were even just a few days ago. So airlines starting to return to more normality and even to profit, a few of them, and flights coming back. We were all worried what was happening in Europe with the outbreaks there, thinking that was the great threat to travel earlier this week. But now this comes out of left field. And with this new variant, it's not something you can really, play around with that much. If you waited, say, a week, then we could have what happened with the Delta variant that seeded here, and the government was blamed a lot for that. So it is better to be safe than sorry. We're all, everybody's a bit worried about the testing regime, whether that will introduce PCR tests instead of lateral flow tests for vaccinated people coming back from non-red list countries. I mean, the other thing, Paul, the other bigger picture of this is the government has restated earlier this week at a conference I attended that in January it's planning to overhaul the entire travel system. Now, we were all led to believe that this would be in a positive way, but I think this is a big setback now. So the worry is not just for what's happening in South Africa and its neighbouring countries. It could be what else is going to come down the line. And we could also see more countries added to the red list, like Hong Kong, for example. It could be a domino effect.
Sally, what is your advice to the person that's got a trip to South Africa over Christmas? What do they do today?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to not immediately cancel. You need to consult your travel operator, whether you've booked directly with the airline or with your travel agent, for example. That's the first port of call. You also need to check the government's gov.uk has all the rules around the red list in place. So don't sort of immediately hit the panic button and cancel everything right away. Obviously, keep a weather eye on developments as they go forward. It's vital that you have travel insurance. So obviously when a country is put on the red list, it means that the FCDO, the government department in charge of foreign politics and regulation in that area, will also potentially put these countries on its list as well, meaning that you won't be able to get travel insurance. So I think it might affect future bookings, but if you have a booking already, just follow the usual lines of inquiry that you would have, say, when we had the full traffic light system in place.
And you mentioned concerns over Europe. Lots of people potentially have got holidays there. When might we hear? Or people want to spend time with friends and family that they haven't seen for months over Christmas. Are there any indications that anything might change there? Because cases really rising. We're seeing in France there's a new mask-wearing mandate that comes into force from today. Some European countries going into lockdown. This might scupper some more trips.
Yes, obviously it is worrying. There are not any signs at the moment. OK, so if we park the new variant that we have been talking about, we park that to one side, and it was just about the outbreaks in Europe. There are no signs that the government plans to introduce bans in and out of those countries at present at all. But it's a different matter if you factor in the new variant. If it is found to have seeded in any of the European countries, yes, we could easily see travel bans come into place with, say, individual EU nation states. It is important to check that you've got all your jabs and you've been vaccinated when you're travelling to any destination anyway, and to check those destinations to see what rules and regulations they have. It's important to remember also that the EU, when it comes to the pandemic, each country has its sovereign powers over what it does on its borders, even though the EU acts together, for example, with the EU COVID pass. Nevertheless, each individual country still has rights to impose its own border restrictions. So, we're not out of the woods yet by a long chalk, unfortunately.
Really good to hear your thoughts this morning, Sally. Thank you. Sally Gethin, travel consultant. They're joining us on the Great British Breakfast, and we'll have more on that new virus that's, or the new variant, I should say, of COVID that's been discovered in some parts of southern Africa later on this morning.
Yeah, and let us know what you think. We heard earlier from Dave that said, well done to the government acting swiftly. Travel companies are selfish. They can whinge and whine, but our security is imperative. So, do you think the government have made the right decision very quickly, saying, that's it, right, flights suspended from 6 countries? You can get in touch with us, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Yep, just coming up to 10 minutes past 7. Really good to have your company this morning. Here's what else is making the headlines. French fishermen planning to block the Channel Tunnel in the port of Calais today over the ongoing licence row with the UK. Downing Street says the government has contingency plans in place in case of a disruption to supplies. The French are demanding more rights to fish in British waters.
Now, Tony Blair has called on the Labour Party to reject wokeism and push its far-left factions to the margins if it wants to get into government again. The former Prime Minister says he believes the party has a culture problem with many working-class voters, as well as a credibility problem with those in the centre of the political spectrum.
An independent NHS body set up to tackle health inequalities has committed to avoiding using blanket acronyms such as BAME. The NHS Race and Health Observatory found that such terms aren't representative, they erase identities and fail to appreciate the nuance of ethnic inequality in the UK.
In the sport, it was a bad night for Tottenham. They had a shocker after going down to 10 men. They lost 2-1 to the Slovenian side, NS Mura, leaving their Europa Conference League last 16 hopes hanging by a thread.
Yeah, not good for Spurs. Better news, though, for their London rivals West Ham, who qualified for the Europa League last 16. The Hammers beating Rapid Vienna 2-0 in their Group H match in Austria.
And Leicester's resurgence continued. They topped their Europa League group after a 3-1 victory over Liga Warsaw.
And today's weather, rain clearing south, then colder with sunny spells and scattered heavy showers. It's going to get very windy, especially across western and northern areas, with stormy conditions for parts of North and East Scotland, with some heavy snow for high ground. And I think I just said H instead of H, which really winds quite a lot of people up, including people at home. So H, sorry about that.
Because last week we were talking about HS2, quite a lot. Tony Blair, though, the former leader of the Labour Party, former Prime Minister, has made comments saying the party's too woke. Lots of you getting in touch. Keith says, I'm definitely no fan of Blair, but he has a point. Effectively, Blair is saying the Labour Party is currently unelectable because it's gone too woke and it needs to kind of cut off the more fringe, extreme left parts of the party.
Yeah, someone else says Labour are unelectable. All they bang on about is race and gender, labelling us and putting us in different boxes, thus causing and creating more divisions than ever. Far too woke for their liking.
One viewer says their translation of it is, Labour have to lie about their values, principles, beliefs and policies to scam their way back into power.
Yeah, Martin says they have to stop pretending they're woke to please the minority and push away the majority. Another viewer says wokeism is not something the Labour Party can reject. It says they are ideologically committed to it from a grassroots level all the way up to the most powerful people in the party, essentially saying that wokeism is a part of the Labour Party and you can't separate the two.
Is it? Is Blair right? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Yeah, 12 minutes past 7. All this week, GB News spending time just across the sea in Northern Ireland to get the latest on the protocol negotiations and what the public think about the government's recent decision-making. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, has been speaking to Brandon Lewis, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, about the recent tragedy in the English Channel and what response the government would be taking.
And we've been talking, the protocol and whatever about Brexit and, the country's dealing with it. I mean, a big part of why people voted for Brexit, of course, was to take back control, not least of all control of our borders. And yet, over the last year, the UK government has proven it's got no control of our borders.
Well, certainly, I'd say, look, I represent, as a constituency MP, Great Yarmouth, which is about the 5th highest Leave vote in the United Kingdom. And a large proportion of the people I've met over the course of the last few years and through the campaign, both in Great Yarmouth and elsewhere, one of the reasons they were voting to leave the EU was they wanted to get back control of our borders. They wanted to see an end of free movement, and we have delivered that through leaving the EU. There is a real challenge, and I was an immigration minister for a while, so I know just how difficult this challenge is. And it's, as the Home Secretary has rightly outlined, as the Prime Minister outlined, this is something we need to work together as an international community, because ultimately these people are coming from outside Europe. They're often coming from very dangerous places, taking treacherous routes, led by criminal gangs. And we've got to break that business model, show people that this isn't a route that is worth taking the treacherous route. You've got to do it legally. It's the only way to do it. And we've got to break these vile criminal gangs from having a business model that is working for them in a way that is just abhorrent.
But isn't that the kind of route I'm trying to get at, is that actually in some ways Brexit and that kind of take back control, ultimately the end is not how things are, because you do need to work with France and others to make things happen. Ultimately, Brexit's never going to deliver control of our borders.
Well, leaving the EU, we were always very clear, and the Prime Minister was always clear.
Never meant we don't people coming in.
But leaving the EU didn't mean we don't work with our friends and partners. You know, we've got strong friends and partners across the EU and globally. And as I say, this issue goes beyond the EU borders as well. As we know, part of the EU suffers because a lot of these people are coming from outside the EU, from Africa and elsewhere. So this is a wide global issue that we've got to be working together. Obviously, there's a particular reason for us to be working with France because of the issues around the Channel, and we've done that over the years. We need to step that up. We need to make sure we're working closely together to really get on top of this problem, because every time governments, both here in the UK and abroad, have taken action to try and deal with this issue, the criminal gangs find another way around. It's what criminals do. So we've got to keep moving, keep ahead of the criminal gangs and break this business model.
And just very finally in this, but isn't that the problem, is that, you know, at least for the last year, for the last 6 months, Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, is saying that the government needs to do more, introduce new legislation. Frankly, it's not working. If anything, the situation is getting worse. And that's what voters are concerned about, is that this government seems entirely impotent when it comes to trying to deal with this. At what point do voters turn around and say, well, I'm sorry, Home Secretary, I'm sorry, government, you just can't manage to do this?
Look, I think my experience talking to voters about these issues is voters realise these are really complicated issues. We've seen, not just from the tragedy that we saw yesterday, but just more widely over the last few years. This is a very, very complicated issue. It's why it's right the Home Secretary has been working through to bring forward legislation that produces, because it's one of those things where you can just say there's one thing we can do that will fix the issue. We need a package around a solution, a package of measures. That's what the new bill will bring forward. That's what the Home Secretary is delivering. That bill will be going through Parliament, and I think that is a pathway to resolving this issue, as well as working with our partners around the world.
There you go, that's Brandon Lewis, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. It is, of course, Northern Ireland Week this week on GBNews.
Your documentary is going to be out today on YouTube.
Yeah, there is a documentary out on YouTube later, and I believe they are playing it in full on The Money as well. It's basically kind of a little snapshot of Northern Ireland and how people there are feeling about the protocol and its implications.
Don't miss that later on. But coming up here on the Great British Breakfast, we're going to run through the front pages. But first, your weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. Storm Arwen is arriving today and lasting overnight and into tomorrow. There's going to be very strong winds, damaging gusts in places, and for some a bit of snow as well. That's because the storm system is coming in from the north, so it's bringing with it cold air. But it's really the winds that are the greatest cause for concern, really picking up later today across northern Britain, but also down the west side. The winds will strengthen through the evening and overnight. So it's a blustery day. It's a grey, wet start across the south. Rain here, but increasingly across northern Scotland. Snow showers packing in, accompanied by those strong and gusty winds. That's going to make for some pretty hazardous travelling conditions, especially later on, say, along the A9. Some brightness developing later over northern England, maybe Northern Ireland, but it's going to feel cold as those winds continue to strengthen. And those winds, as I said, are the greatest cause for concern. We have a yellow warning covering much of northern and western Britain through today. Gusts of 55 to 65 miles an hour could easily cause some disruption, certainly to ferries. And an amber warning for northern and eastern Scotland, parts of northeast England. Gusts here of 75 miles an hour. That could cause some structural damage. Certainly the potential for issues to power supplies, along with travel disruption. And the snow will keep going for a while over northern Scotland. In fact, this zone of wet weather as it sinks south will chiefly be of rain, but we could easily see some snow from that down to relatively low levels for a time during the course of the night. Very strong winds continuing overnight across Wales, southwest England, along with the east coast. Also, it's going to be a cold night and a cold start to the weekend. Warnings remain in place into Saturday. Still that northerly wind and still this mixture of rain, sleet and snow pushing southwards. As I said, any snow at low levels not expected to stick around but you could see some further wintry showers keep going across the east. Elsewhere, it does turn drier, but it will be cold. All the details of the Met Office weather warnings are on the Met Office website.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7pm for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7pm till 8pm, Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8pm weekdays on GB News.
£20 you're with the Great British Breakfast, and let's just bring you up to date with the latest on the crisis in the Channel. Now, Boris Johnson has told French President Emmanuel Macron that British border officials could begin patrols in northern France as soon as next week.
Yeah, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is heading to Calais on Sunday as other officials head to Paris for talks. The PM says British vessels could also operate in French waters, as he told the French president that, in his words, we must go further and faster together to deal with the problem.
Other plans include deploying more advanced technology like sensors and radar, reciprocal maritime patrols in each other's territorial waters, deepening the work of the country's joint intelligence cell, immediate work on bilateral returns agreement with France, and talks there to establish a UK-EU returns agreement.
Yeah, well, Bruno Bonnell is a member of the French National Assembly. He's a member of Emmanuel Macron's party and joins us now. Bruno, really good to talk to you this morning. I think the general consensus is that both countries need to work together. They need to be more cooperative. But is there more that the French could be doing from your perspective?
Well, first of all, this tragedy was a wake-up call that there is no clear responsibility on any side of the Channel for this disaster, except the fact that we do have to face very organized criminals, smugglers, pushing people at sea in the worst possible conditions. So the collaboration between France and the UK is critical, and I'm glad that we can find bridges to collaborate. What can we do more? What we can do is probably to work even more on European borders. To protect the fact that more and more migrants are actually gathering into Calais, coming from everywhere in Europe, because it's the smallest path to the UK territories. So there is what we see, And there is all this intelligence that Mr. Johnson was talking about. There is also this work made outside Calais that has to be taken in consideration.
Really difficult to police the borders that you're referring to because France is a member of Schengen. You have freedom of movement within the EU. Difficult to stop those people coming across these very porous borders.
You're absolutely right, because it's the rule of Europe, the Schengen agreements. But I'm talking about the borders between Spain and Italy and Africa, Greece and Africa, maybe some border on the east side as well, to avoid those migrations coming from very far. Because as I said, those very organized criminals, they have ways to really drive for days those migrants to the critical points, making them dream of a promised land that unfortunately is very often ending as in the worst possible conditions.
Yeah, and Bruno, the real crisis now is operating in the Channel. And the frustration from people in the UK is that they're seeing images of people getting onto boats and French police sitting in cars, and it looks like to us, watching them get on with it. Why is that happening?
Well, let me tell you the explanation, because there is one. When those criminals organize a departure, it's not just one single boat, as you can see on your screen right now. It's usually a couple of boats going together on the same beach. It's a tactic to have a better chance to have people leaving the border. So effectively, those images may seem as the policeman not taking care of the situation, because at the same time they take care of another boat somewhere else next to this beach. So please, I don't think that it's a good way to try to criticize the enormous efforts on both sides, on both forces, that all the police is trying to make happen. I think that we will put more means, we will make more collaboration, but let's be real. The magnitude of people trying to leave is so big that even though we stop 20,000 of them, we still have to face the fact that some of them do escape and do take the difficult channel.
One suggestion would be that the French police could take away oars, take away engines. They could actually just puncture the boats so that they weren't seaworthy.
Well, yeah, of course, we could do it. But then remember the same comments we had because so-called police was ripping apart, the shelters, or we heard the worst of people trying to effectively stop physically some migrants. So there is a balance of power here where first of all, it's the protection of human beings that is critical. And if we were puncturing those boats, and so no doubt that the smuggler will reuse it and make those boats even in the worst condition to go at sea. So again, let's trust the police force. Let's be very happy that the collaboration between the French and the UK authorities are finally reaching a point where they trust each other. And let's hope too that we rebuild trust between EU and UK, which has been damaged by not only this tragic story, but the fisherman story and other little dispute. So let's rebuild the trust between allies and friends.
If there is that trust, will we see British border officials patrolling the coast of France?
Yeah. I mean, that's the proposal that has been made, and I think that's a good one. That we show that together, without this complicated story of international territories at sea, they can collaborate and move freely to protect both sides of the channel and save lives. So I'm personally in favor of this joint patrolling.
MP of Calais said that was a crazy suggestion.
Well, people always criticize. What is for the best has to be said clearly. And I think that if it's for the best and not another excuse to say that one side is not doing enough, so we need to go on rescue for this side, if it's really in full trust of saving lives and helping to sort out the situation, I would vote for it.
These two issues may or may not be related, Bruno. The French fishermen, they'll attempt to stop Channel Tunnel freight today. They're going to block the ports of Calais and a few other ports for several hours to raise pressure on the UK to grant licences for boats fishing in British waters. Is there a chance that both these issues can end up getting talked about and they could influence each other?
You know, at this hour of this tragic event, it's always complicated to mention this deal in parallel. But effectively, the question of granting those licenses is not solved yet, and people are getting more and more excited and nervous about it. I think that on this front too, trust has to be restored, and we need to find a way. Negotiations are on the way. It takes much more time than I was expecting, but I'm hopeful that at the end of the day, we'll find a deal.
How do you feel? We're just hearing that these high-level talks that were supposed to be taking place between France and the UK have been cancelled because France is so unhappy with Boris Johnson's letter and his suggestions. If that is the sort of diplomatic playing field we've got, more people are going to die, aren't they?
Well, you know, diplomacy is the art of sometime waiting for staying at the table and discussing. I don't think, even though I think that in what the proposal of Mr. Johnson, there are some very good points. I think that making this letter public before sitting with the French authority was probably not a very, very smart move. And I would have rather
to cancel the meeting,
that
though,
they
Bruno.
sit down, they negotiate together, and then they publish a common letter. That's probably explaining the tension right now. But again, everybody wants to find a way. So let's the diplomacy work now and be a little patient. And I'm sure we'll find a way where together we can resolve at least the emergency of the issue.
Bruno, maybe they shouldn't have published the letter, but that's still no reason to call off the meeting when this situation is so urgent.
You know, again, I mean, there is a point in the negotiation where people are taking kind of posture. No doubt that underneath this public information, the negotiations are ongoing, and I'm very lucid that both sides want to solve this solution. And again, don't believe that we take those people as hostage of an obscure negotiation. Everybody in France, in the UK, in EU is completely aware that we're talking about human lives.
Bruno, thank you very much for speaking to us. Bruno Bonnell, a very optimistic outlook as to what's to come, a member of Parliament for the En Marche party and member of the French National Assembly. Appreciate your time. And
we will bring you more news, more details, hopefully, when we get them on that report that apparently France has cancelled that meeting with the UK following those suggestions by Boris Johnson on how they can try and tackle this migrant crisis in the Channel. Right, it is exactly 7:30. Let's take a look at what is making today's front pages then, starting with The Independent reports. Boris Johnson has rejected pleas to provide safe routes for refugees to reach the UK from Europe. This follows on from the deaths of 27 people attempting to cross the Channel.
Unsurprisingly, that story does make the front page of most of the papers. The Telegraph leads with one husband who believes his wife was one of the 27 drowned in the English Channel migrant disaster. The man claims his wife's GPS signal suddenly disappeared when he was tracking her across the sea.
The Guardian reports the news that South Africa and 5 more African countries have been added to the red list as a new COVID variant poses a significant threat. It's feared to be more transmissible and has the potential to evade immunity.
That story was also on The Times. Their headline is Variant Halts Travel to Africa. Ministers and scientists are deeply concerned about this new variant seen in South Africa and Botswana.
Yeah, the Mirror has an exclusive on DIY death boats as 4 flimsy vessels were found on Dungeness Beach in Kent yesterday.
The Express headline claims UK troops are to patrol French beaches. It's part of a united effort to tackle the crisis, as you know, that we saw develop in such a tragic way on Wednesday.
Yeah, the Mail reports that Boris Johnson has told Emmanuel Macron that he risks another Channel tragedy unless he stops blocking UK help to patrol French beaches. British boots could reportedly be on the ground. That is, border officials. Boots of the border officials could be on the ground as soon as Monday.
The Metro has the voice of one person trying to make that journey. We just want to live like you. It's from a 23-year-old Iraqi interviewed by the paper as they vow they're going to make that journey despite what happened on Wednesday.
The Eye also focusing on issues in the Channel. I know the risk. This is my only way to reach England. The words of one would-be migrant.
The Sun has I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, saying the show can't afford to lose any more big names after, you'll know, Richard Madeley was forced to pull out. There are concerns there over Arlene Phillips and also the DJ Naughty Boy, apparently, who are struggling.
Yeah, and the Star's top story is that Madonna lost her glasses under the bed and she had to go and get them. Right, let's give you just some more detail on that breaking story. So this is a meeting between Home Secretary Priti Patel and her French counterpart Gerald Darmanin on Sunday, cancelled because of Boris Johnson's letter about the migrant crisis. Apparently, the French Interior Ministry described the Prime Minister's public letter to Emmanuel Macron as unacceptable. So Priti Patel was not invited anymore to the meeting, which will also be attended by other European ministers. The Home Office so far have declined to comment.
Well, joining us in the studio now is journalist and broadcaster Petri Hoskin. Petri, let's just get your view. We were talking about it earlier. This relationship between France and
it's toxic, isn't it?
That Bruno Bonnell was
a good word.
He was the most diplomatic French man that I've ever heard talking in terms of politics.
You couldn't get him angry, could you?
You could not get him angry.
But in the midst of that conversation we had, we hear that this meeting's been cancelled.
I know, look, this is not the time to be complaining about who wrote what letter and who, but we've got to address Monsieur Macron is not a fan of us. And I think there's a feeling, and you asked the question very well, Paul, about the idea of the French fishing licences somehow, and there is a feeling, isn't there, there's going to be a quid pro quo agreement here. And I was saying in the last hour that unfortunately and tragically, these deaths are being used as a political football. And it's extraordinary and it's distasteful, but it seems that that's what's going on here. To be upset about somebody posting a letter or publishing a letter at a time when today more immigrants may die, I think looks poor on the French. And Bruno was keen to point out it's nobody's fault. There's this whole idea that no one is to blame. It was his opening statement. There is no blame on either side. Yeah. It seems that there is this hands-off approach and the use of these deaths for political gain.
Yeah, and we should stress, by the way, apparently the meeting is still happening. It's just that they've said Priti Patel's not invited. Yeah. They're meeting with European ministers.
To discuss the outer European borders, probably.
Exactly, yeah. But essentially the British aren't invited.
Well, extraordinary. I mean, absolutely extraordinary. I do have words, but I'd be fired for using them.
Mind your French. Yeah.
Let's move on. People are waking up this morning to chaos of their travel plans. Maybe they now won't be able to see friends, family over the Christmas period. This new variant causing havoc.
Yeah, this is the red list was abolished, as we know, a few weeks ago, wasn't it? The travel list.
Apparently the red list has always been there. It's just been empty.
Empty. All right.
Empty from.
Well, words. But there. So there's now the Southern African countries are on this red list. There's this new variant which has 32, 35 mutations to it, which has gone much further than we've seen before. This is, of course, COVID we're discussing now. It's a super variant. But there is such fatigue, pandemic fatigue, that I know anybody watching this morning, I guarantee you, has gone...
I think that's the whole world.
Everybody is going, oh, shut up.
Yeah.
I'm sick of this.
But we can't afford to be fed up with it.
Well, we can't, but let me just point out that in South Africa, there are 77 cases.
So you think this is a step too far and too soon?
No, I don't. But I'm so tired of the hyperbole and all the other stuff that is done with COVID and has been done to us over the last few years. And it is the fault of governments. It's the fault of this British government for lying to us and admitting to it. They lied to us at the beginning. They feared us into our homes. They scared us into doing what we were told. And people are now tired of it.
But we're faring quite well. Look at what's happened in Austria, in France. They've got to wear masks in different places. They've got to show proof of their 2 jabs before they can go to a restaurant. Actually, at this point, maybe we're just clinging on.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've not done too badly, but I'm talking about the fatigue. And the reason there is that a traffic light system when it comes to terrorism is psychological, right? It's not there for any other purpose. It is there to say, oh, we're at amber. Oh, we've gone up to red. So we're psychologically prepped for it. If we're always at red, we're going, oh, so what? And it seems that the pandemic has sort of psychologically, for the last 2 years, they've put us on red. And we're all now going, oh, for goodness sake, I'm bored of this. Now, the last thing we need is to be bored of this. Because if this variant is as deadly, and it's going to be called new, N-U.
Yeah, because it's the next letter.
Because it's the next letter.
There was Delta, then there have been lots of other different versions, and they've got to end it.
They've got to end it now, so it's N-U. If this is as bad, then we need to be attentive to it. But how do they make us attentive when everybody's rolling their eyes and going, oh, shut up, I'm fed up with this? So I think we need to be
I think it's
more
the fact,
honest.
I think it's the fact that we were told the jab will solve everything. The jab will you can reopen society, and the only way to do that is to get the jab.
Mutate.
And there have been mutations, but this one is so many mutations that the vaccines may not recognise.
May not.
We don't know yet.
The vaccines that were first brought out, and of course, don't forget they're continually being brought out. The scientists are so clever that they are building in up to 30 mutations, but that is a mutation that they predict in a laboratory. It's very, very different to what happens in the human body and what it comes across. And they think this variant has been mixed somehow with the HIV that was mentioned. So they don't always know which mutation, because in the real world, things change more quickly.
We are getting really short on time. Very quickly, would the Labour Party deal with it any better? Tony Blair says they need to sort of shake off their woke perspective.
Look, if we're going to be very quick about this, I'd just say to Tony Blair, you've had your time. Sling your hook. I mean, nobody wants to listen to him. He's desperate to get back into politics.
And
blah, blah, blah.
And cats.
Cats, much more
Not the
interesting.
musical, the animal.
The animals. Well, you asked me to check about this story about psychopaths, how to check whether your cat is a psychopath. Do you have a cat? You just a dog?
No, we have a dog.
You have a dog?
No cat,
I have both.
Oh, right.
And my cat is literally a psychopath. She hates women. She will... I'll be sat on the sofa
But she hates
minding my
you.
own... She hates me, but she hates all women.
Right.
And she'll be watching me, run across the floor and scratch me.
Right.
And then run off.
Why do you have a pet that does that?
Because my son loves her. She is amazing with him.
Right.
But horrible with me.
Why are cats psychopaths?
Well, they're saying it's been bred into them, and that actually it's not their fault. They just are.
They're genetically
psychopaths. They're genetically psycho, and you can tell if they're a psychopath if they do what I've just explained. My cat, Miss Edith, does purring when attacking. She does that as well. My cat dominates me. Yeah, that's true. My cat torments their prey. Yep, she does that. And my cat sits in high places. Her favourite thing is to be on the mantelpiece. If there's anything on there, a phone, she goes...
Yeah, they're in charge. Cats own you.
Yeah.
You own dogs.
Yeah. She is mad, but
That's
they're
the way I'd
saying she
rather
can't
have
help it.
Yeah.
Petri, thank you very much. There we
Yeah.
go. Keep your views coming in. Lots of you have got
so
interesting
many of
things
you
to say about the Labour Party, and particularly Tony Blair's analysis that it needs to sort of drop its woke act. Is that fair? Let us know. But lots to come here. Will there be enough wine on the shelves for Christmas? And we're touring a steelworks in Middlesbrough. That's just received £15 million worth of funding. Don't miss it.
Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday. You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Good to have you with us this Friday morning. We're going to go to the northeast now because Teesside steel company Paraloy has secured a £50 million funding package, enabling it to fulfil more exports, than it has in its 90-year history. The money is from Santander UK, supported by the government's UK Export Finance, which provides export credit. Our cameras joined the Tees Valley Mayor Ben Houchem for a private tour of the Middlesbrough facility, and as our North East of England reporter Rachel Sweeney tells us, it's good news for everyone there.
A team of 350 working from 3 factories producing high-end metal for a global market. This is Paraloy. A £15 million funding package enables Paraloy to fulfil the most exports in its 90-year history, with shipments to North America, the Middle East and Asia Pacific. But it's Teesside at the heart of the operation.
Teesside has a rich history of metal. In the past, we've had a long history of the right kind of skills in the area. It is a concern that we invest more in skills and training in the years to come with all the work that's going on. We've got over 30-odd vacancies right now in the business, so we are really keen on developing that side of the business. But the Teesside area has a good mix of fabrication, welding, machining, and all that kind of metallurgically related products.
They've opened 2 additional sites and recruited more than 70 new staff so far. They're still looking for another 35 people, but will the jobs go to locals?
95% of everybody we bring in is regional, so from Newcastle down to sort of the North Yorkshire areas, and that sort of catchment area is where most people come from. I just love the frankness and the hard work ethic of the northern region. So it's been a great move for us.
The northeast of England is truly a fascinating place to be at the moment. We are seeing record deals from businesses right across the globe. People want to set up camp right here on Teesside and across the northeast. It is stabilising our local economy. It is bringing in jobs, and the Paraloy deal is just one more cherry on the cake. The Tees Valley Mayor Ben Houchem has been visiting the site, and he says this is only great news for the people who live here.
Well, it's incredible. I want more businesses like Paraloy in Teesside. I mean, they are doing some fantastic stuff, and it's great to see them access the UK Export Finance. So any business out there that is looking to export in the amazing way that Paraloy does right here, then they need to access that, because it's allowed them to take on more orders, be able to access new markets, grow their business, but also more importantly as well, grow their headcount, create jobs, but good quality, well-paid jobs, the types of jobs we need in this area.
From a low-wage service sector economy to an area thriving on high skills and global exports, the world is watching Teesside.
There you go, that's our North East of England reporter, Rachel Sweeney. It is 13 minutes to 8. Here's what else is making the headlines today then. A travel ban, as we've been talking about, will be enforced today on 6 African nations over a new COVID-19 variant, which officials are saying is the worst one we've seen so far. This is from midday. Flights from South Africa, Namibia, Lesotho, Botswana, Eswatini and Zimbabwe will be suspended, and all the countries will be added to the red list. Health Secretary Sajid Javid announced that UK travellers will be required to quarantine COVID-19. No cases of the variant have as yet been found in Britain.
The Prime Minister has written to the French President, Emmanuel Macron, setting out a 5-point plan to prevent channel crossings. Well, that letter was made public before it went to the French President. The measures include joint maritime patrols in each other's territorial waters and better real-time intelligence sharing. This letter, and the way it was published, has reportedly led to the cancellation of a meeting between our Home Secretary Priti Patel and her French counterpart Gérald Darmanin, due to take place this weekend.
Urgent action is needed to tackle the problem of youth unemployment. This is according to a new Lords report that's calling for reforms to careers guidance and further education funding. It says the COVID-19 pandemic was a perfect storm for youth unemployment, with 70% of job losses amongst the under 25s.
In sport, Rangers' new boss had a good first game in charge, leading his side into the Europa League knockout stages after a 2-0 victory over Sparta Prague.
Yeah, it wasn't such a good news for Celtic as they lost 3-2 to Bayer Leverkusen in Germany. The Scottish side now find themselves out of Europe and the worst defensive record in the competition this season.
Let's look at the weather very briefly. Rain today. It's going to clear south and there'll be some colder, sunny spells and some scattered heavy showers. It's going to get very windy across western and northern areas with stormy conditions for parts of the north and east of Scotland, with some heavy snow for high ground.
Right, really good to have you with us this morning. Let's take a look at some of the biggest finance stories around today. Away from Black Friday, business commentator Michael Wilson joins us now. Michael, what's going on at Amazon? They've got problems with some of their stuff.
I think Black Friday, unfortunately, does come into this because this is the busiest day for anybody who's involved in retail, and that includes Amazon as well. What's going on here is apparently the GMB union is saying that there was a high rate of calls for ambulances to come from Amazon plants to hospitals because of workers being injured. What the company is saying, what Amazon's actually saying is, no, it's not true. That was a lot of those are preconditions, and that's preconditions amongst workers, and that's why they were calling ambulances. It does come, though, as a strike is threatened right across the United States and Europe and indeed the UK by Amazon workers. Now, I don't know where this is going right now, but this is what they were threatening, and this is talking about. This is the GMB, the TUC, Momentum, War on Want. You know, you have the charities to it. They're all saying that Amazon workers quite simply give a great deal and don't get a great deal back. So that's the kind of industrial mood at the moment at Amazon. I suspect. I mean, I've heard nothing about whether this is going ahead or not, but that's the complaint, that the GMB is actually saying that they've had these ambulance calls to Amazon, people apparently getting injured there. Amazon's saying, you know, the majority of those calls were really about preconditions rather than people being injured on the job. I mean, those are the two sides of the story.
And actually, some breaking news about Amazon, Michael. Amazon's largest UK warehouse is apparently being blockaded at the moment by climate activists targeting them on their busiest day of the year. This is Extinction Rebellion's Black Friday demonstration. It's about 20 activists there, and it's been going on since 4 a.m. This is in Dunfermline in Scotland. Another day, another failed energy supplier.
Well, two actually, yeah. Luckily, I mean, not luckily for the people involved, but 70,000 people, Entice and Orbit. These are two of them. This is what's happening now. If you remember, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were talking about the whole of this business, and actually, the sort of industry lobby of the whole business is saying that it's actually not fit to work. How can it work when suppliers are having their prices capped and they're paying more for wholesale than they can actually get from customers because the prices are capped? That's the issue. Now, we saw Bulb go into administration. The reason that Bulb hasn't stopped is quite simply because there are so many customers, 1.2 million customers, and the taxpayer is going to be paying £1.7 billion to keep it in administration, because the way it works is like this. If you go bust and you're an energy company, you go to Ofgem. Ofgem, which is the regulator, shifts your customers to another supplier. What they do with how much they have to pay is down to the work between the suppliers and the customers. So nobody effectively, literally, is without a light or without heat. But Bulb was so big that this felt like their customers could not be absorbed by the rest of the industry very easily. So therefore, the business secretary took the view that, or the government and the business secretary took the view that there should be some kind of administration paid for in this. In other words, it keeps trading, but it's in administration. It is a mess, isn't it? I mean, it does. This absolutely needs sorting out. But I would suggest, I mean, if I were a politician, I'd make all the right noises. But I've been saying, let's just see how energy prices actually go into the new year after the winter, because we might just see some surprises. OPEC meet now again. Sorry to get technical about this, but OPEC meets on December the 2nd. We've had a lot of countries actually releasing a lot of oil and petroleum from their own strategic reserves. So it's all in a bit of a mess at the moment. And indeed, the International Energy Authority only saying yesterday that it's criticising its members for not cooling off prices. So I think there's a lot to run in this story yet.
We will wait, watch, see and remain hopeful that prices do eventually start to come down. Let's talk about a little bit of a Christmas supply chain concern people have. Majestic Wine have promised shelves will remain full. Well, they've said shelves will remain full following a bit of a concern that bottles of alcohol could be missing because simply it's the same old story again. We don't have enough drivers to move them around the country.
There is. So the likes of Moet Hennessy, Pernod Ricard and Campari, amongst others, have written to the Wine and Spirits Trade Federation. Association rather, and said, you know, we're really worried about drivers. Majestic say, hang on a second, they weren't signatories to that letter. We've actually done what we're supposed to do. We've been intuitive in choosing suppliers and so on to make sure that our shelves are stocked. Apparently, get right down there straight away. 1.8 million bottles to go. So, in other words, they're saying, you know, we've handled this ourselves. I think it's something that, you know, again, we've touched on before, you know, during this supply crisis. It's all right for governments and trade bodies to get involved, but really that just ends up in a load of talk. What it's really down to is energetic retailers, like I assume, I mean, this is why the stories come out now. Majestic is clearly thinking this is a good time to release this story, saying we didn't go along with the herd. We decided to go our own way, and look at that. Look at us. We've got full shelves. Well, good for them. I mean, that's the story, and that's what's actually happening right now. I do feel it's down to business to try to be intuitive and try to be energetic around the kind of issues that we're all facing. I mean, it's what we all do in real life. You know, it's what families do when they're planning something as which would appear as simple as childcare, for example. But there are ways and means of doing it. There are swings and roundabouts, etc.
Yeah, it's called resilience. Thanks, Michael. Really appreciate your time. That's business and finance commentator Michael Wilson joining us on the Great British Breakfast.
Now, still to come here, we're going to be speaking to Kay Marsh from Channel Rescue about the ongoing crisis in the Channel. Also, we didn't ask Michael there to give you a little bit of respite, but Black Friday, have you eyed up any deals? Now, the sales might save you money if you can find a good one. But is Black Friday actually the best thing for the environment? And is it bad for small businesses? That's coming up after the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. Storm Arwen is arriving today and lasting overnight and into tomorrow. There's going to be very strong winds, damaging gusts in places, and for some, a bit of snow as well. That's because the storm system is coming in from the north, so it's bringing with it cold air. But it's really the winds that are the greatest cause for concern, really picking up later today across northern Britain, but also down the west side. The winds will strengthen through the evening and overnight. So it's a blustery day. It's a grey, wet start across the south. Rain here, but increasingly across northern Scotland, snow showers packing in, accompanied by those strong and gusty winds. That's going to make for some pretty hazardous travelling conditions, especially later on, say, along the A9. Some brightness developing later over northern England, maybe Northern Ireland, but it's going to feel cold as those winds continue to strengthen. And those winds, as I said, are the greatest cause for concern. We have a yellow warning covering much of northern and western Britain through today. Gusts of 55 to 65 miles an hour could easily cause some disruption, certainly to ferries. And an amber warning for northern and eastern Scotland, parts of northeast England. Gusts here of 75 miles an hour. That could cause some structural damage. Certainly the potential for issues to power supplies along with travel disruption. And the snow will keep going for a while over northern Scotland. In fact, this zone of wet weather as it sinks south will chiefly be possibility of rain, but we could easily see some snow from that down to relatively low levels for a time during the course of the night. Very strong winds continuing overnight across Wales, southwest England, along with the east coast. Also, it's going to be a cold night and a cold start to the weekend. Warnings remain in place into Saturday. Still that northerly winds and still this mixture of rain, sleet and snow pushing southwards. As I said, any snow at low levels not expected to stick around, but you could see some. Further wintry showers keep going across the east. Elsewhere it does turn drier, but it will be cold. All the details of the Met Office weather warnings are on the Met Office website.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A very good morning to you. You're watching the Great British Breakfast with Paul Hawkins and Rosie Wright. It's just gone 8 o'clock in the morning, and these are the stories making the headlines this Friday.
Now, all flights from the UK from 6 African nations are going to be suspended from today after a new COVID variant has emerged. Now, officials say it's the worst one they've seen so far. We'll be finding out why.
Elsewhere this morning, the UK government wants British border officials to patrol northern France as soon as next week. It's part of Boris Johnson's plan to help tackle the number of people crossing the channel. Question is, will the French agree to it? Probably not. The breaking news this morning that the French have cancelled their meeting with Priti Patel.
The former Labour Prime Minister, Tony Blair, is urging the Labour Party to reject wokeism and marginalise its far left if it ever wants to win power again. Is he right?
By now, hot deals. It's Black Friday. While you might be able to bag a bargain, are these sales at the expense of small businesses? And are they actually good for the environment?
Well, a very good morning. Let's start with that news that developed late yesterday. A new COVID variant has been found in Botswana, South Africa and Hong Kong. It's been named by officials as the worst variant we've seen so far, and it's mutated to a point that scientists haven't seen before. They are really concerned that it may be more transmissible than anyone we've seen so far, and that it may have the potential to evade immunity.
In response, travellers arriving to England from 6 southern African countries will have to quarantine from midday today, with flights also being temporarily banned.
With us now is George Lomonosov, virologist at John Innes Centre in Norwich. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, do you share these concerns about this new strain they've seen? No cases as yet reported here in the United Kingdom, but clearly there is real alarm that it could cause major chaos if it gets here.
Yes, that's the real
issue. It's the number of changes which have been found. I think it's a total of 50 mutations over the whole virus, including 30 in that bit on the surface which makes the virus so recognizable in pictures, the spike protein. And the concern there is that with all those changes, the new version of the spike protein might not be recognized by antibodies that you've produced in response to vaccination or even infection with the original virus. And so that they might actually escape the protection afforded by vaccination. And that would be a real concern, because it would sort of put us back to square one at that point, if that pans out that way.
But will suspending flights, hotel quarantine, whenever this has been put into force before, it hasn't actually ended up stopping the spread of a new variant?
Yes, I mean, that's why it's done so quickly. But, I mean, you're quite right. I mean, you almost feel by the time you've identified something and gone through the process, it may already be too late. I think one of the reasons, or maybe the hope in this case, is that the sheer numbers of visitors from the southern African countries are not that great. I mean, I think it's a matter of, on average, a few hundred a day. So you might be able to do something at source, stop it getting in. Whereas in cases where there's a lot more travel, then it is very difficult. Also, I think obviously people are detecting new variants rather more quickly than they were able in the past. So, I mean, that's the hope. But we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed for that.
Wasn't this always inevitable, George?
Yes, I mean, you're always going to get new variants, and we've seen that already with all the Delta variant which came up. I think what slightly surprised people in this case is the number of mutations which have happened simultaneously. You tend to see things that accumulate more gradually, and that's what's caused the alarm. It might be sufficiently different that it will escape vaccination programs.
How concerned are you about this idea of people's fatigue of the pandemic? We were speaking to our newspaper reviewer earlier who just said they're fed up of it. Can we afford to say, I just don't want to deal with this anymore?
Yeah, I completely understand people's reaction. I think we probably all feel that. I mean, you just don't want it to be around anymore. I mean, it's soon be 2 years. So I absolutely understand the reaction. I mean, unfortunately, we do have to be on our guard still. I mean, it'd be terrible if this did, negate all the gains due to vaccination. So I think, care needs to be taken that we don't go backwards. Because I think if something got in which really did overcome previous immunity, I mean, that would really put us back, well, as I say, back to square one almost. So we just have to, hope, but take measures to try and minimise that possibility.
George, really good to have your thoughts this morning. Thank you so much. That's George Lomonosov, a virologist, joining us on the Great British Breakfast. Just to clarify, those 6 countries then from which UK flights are being suspended: South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Lesotho and Eswatini.
Lots of you getting in touch on this morning. One viewer said, another new variant? What's the point in all these jabs then? I've had my 2 jabs, my booster coming this Sunday. They can't just keep jabbing us when another variant comes out. My arm will look like a used dartboard. It can't be healthy giving us all these jabs. Let's get on with our lives.
And he says, do I think the government has made the right decision to put those countries on the red list? It would be damned if it did, and damned if it didn't. So my answer is yes.
Keep your views coming in. You can email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us too at gbnews.
Yeah, let's bring you up to date then with the latest on the crisis in the Channel. Boris Johnson has told the French President Emmanuel Macron that British border officials could begin patrols in northern France as soon as next week. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, will not be heading to Calais on Sunday for talks with other officials in Paris. This is because the breaking news this morning is that the French have cancelled that meeting with Priti Patel. The meeting's still happening. They're talking to European ministers, but not with Priti Patel because of this letter from the Prime Minister making these suggestions. They're saying that he made it public instead of presenting it at the meeting. In the letter, one of the suggestions that British vessels could also operate in French waters.
Yeah, Boris Johnson told the French president we must go further, faster and together to deal with the problem. Well, it was this 5-point plan that he published the letter. Some of the other ideas were deploying more advanced technology, sensors, for example, radar, reciprocal maritime patrols in each other's territorial waters. Paul just mentioned that. Deepening the work of the country's joint intelligence cell. Not quite sure what that means. And immediate work on bilateral returns agreement with France. Effectively, they want to make it sure that as soon as people arrive at the UK, it would be possible to send them back to France. France so far have not been happy about these suggestions.
Yeah, we're joined now by Kay Marsh from Channel Rescue. Kay, really good to have you on the programme this morning. First of all, just your reaction to this news that's broken that France has cancelled the meeting, at least with Priti Patel. They've told her not to turn up because Boris Johnson has published this 5-point plan ahead of the meeting.
Well, I think it goes to show that they're maybe not so eager to work with each other in solving this humanitarian crisis. The ideas of shore patrols in France, I mean, even throwing unlimited sums of money and resources from our side to help, I mean, it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable solution, is it? This problem, this situation, this humanitarian crisis in the Channel is not going to end unless we solve world peace and climate change. You know, I mean, how long can they patrol the shore for?
Yeah, that's. I mean, I know you are right. We need to solve world peace and fix climate change, but that's certainly not going to happen straight away. And there are people dying in the Channel at the moment.
Exactly. But this problem, it's not going to stop. You know, are they going to control the entire coastline in France indefinitely now? I mean, it's not going to happen, is it? So it's not sustainable. We need to be talking about, instead of this knee-jerk reaction to the situation, we need to come up with a long-term humanitarian solution. Deterrents don't work. This is where all of our strategy comes from currently. We need to be thinking compassionately, and we need to be giving people those safe legal routes to reach the UK.
Okay, those people don't have that option. Just tell us what kind of conversations Channel Rescue are having with people who, and we've seen them quoted this morning again in the papers, who see what happened on Wednesday, but that they are still determined to try and make the crossing. What kind of conversations do you have with them?
Well, I think that just shows the sheer level of desperation of these people. You know, I mean, nobody is putting themselves at that almost definite risk for £35 a week. Nobody is. We need to see this as being, OK, they really are desperate, you know, and we really do need to help. We have a part to play in this. You know, we are a relatively strong economy. We manufacture and sell arms to countries that fuel these political instabilities around the world. So when people come knocking on our door, we need to accept some of that responsibility.
Yeah, so when you talk about humanitarian solution, what are you talking about? Processing asylum applications in the UK or in France or somewhere else in the world? What are you talking about?
Largely what it comes down to is the fact that currently people have to make the crossing. They have to get to the UK before they can start their claim for asylum. Now, the small boat crossings, the border crossings won't stop until we give people the opportunity to claim for asylum somewhere else, whether that be the use of humanitarian visas, which means people wouldn't even need to make the journey to northern France. They could just get their humanitarian visa and be brought here safely and legally.
I know that people at home, they will be saying they don't have to make the Channel crossing because they are safe in France.
Right, but you do understand the concept that we are an island. Yes, so France do take people, as do Germany, Italy, Belgium. You know, it's not a fact that nobody is staying in France, because they definitely are. But some people have family connections here. They have a legitimate reason to want to come here and to believe that their life would be, they would have a safe and happy life here, and they have a legal right to do so.
That is true, Kate. But I mean, asylum applications in the year to September, 37,562, 18% up on the year to September 2020. Where's the limit, or in your opinion, is there no limit?
Well, 2/3 of asylum applications in the UK are granted, and our asylum process is not easy and it is not friendly. It is designed to keep people out, and still 2/3 of those applications are being granted. So it just goes to show that the majority of these people do have a legitimate claim to asylum and a right to be here.
Kay Marsh, thank you very much for speaking to us from Channel Rescue again about the ongoing disaster, crisis, whatever word you want to use, tragedy. What happened on Wednesday, we are still seeing people determined to try and make that journey, and a huge political fallout as a result between France and the UK. Priti Patel no longer invited to that meeting on Sunday.
Yeah, indeed. We'll bring you more details on the political fallout from that no invite. Not a cancellation of the meeting, it's still happening, but effectively Priti Patel uninvited, so there will be political fallout to that, and we'll bring you that here on GB News throughout the day. Right, 12 minutes past 8, here's what else is making the headlines this morning then. French fishermen are planning to block the Channel Tunnel and the port of Calais today over the ongoing licence row with the UK. Downing Street says the government has contingency plans in place in case of a disruption to supplies. The French are demanding more rights to fish in British waters.
Tony Blair has called on the party to reject wokeism and push its far-left factions to the margins if it wants to get into government again. The former Prime Minister says he believes the party has a culture problem with many working-class voters, as well as a credibility problem with those in the centre of the political spectrum.
An independent NHS body set up to tackle health inequalities has committed to avoiding using blanket acronyms such as BAME. The NHS Race and Health Observatory found that such terms aren't representative, erases identities and fails to appreciate the nuance of ethnic inequality in the UK.
In sport, it was a bad night for Tottenham. They've had a shocker after going down to 10 men. The London club lost 2-1 to the Slovenian side NS Mura, leaving their Europa Conference League last 16 hopes hanging by a thread.
But it was better news elsewhere in London as West Ham qualified for the Europa League last 16. The Hammers beating Rapid Vienna 2-0 in their Group H match in Austria.
And Leicester's resurgence continued as they topped the Europa League group after a 3-1 victory over Liga Warsaw.
And today's weather, rain clearing south, then colder, much colder, with sunny spells and scattered heavy showers. It's going to get a lot more windy, especially across western and northern areas, with stormy conditions for parts of North and East Scotland, with some heavy snow for high ground.
It's coming up to 8:15 here on The Great British Breakfast. Now, the former Prime Minister Tony Blair has urged Labour to emphatically reject the woke movement and look at a more liberal, tolerant but commonsensical position.
Commonsensical. Early predictions have said Labour will need a huge swing of voters, especially in working class areas, if they're to gain the advantage in the next dilemma, similar to that Blair did in 1997.
Well, Tony Blair also went on to say that a lurch to the far left will never be electorally successful, and Labour must win back the trust of those in the centre who've become disenfranchised with both parties.
Yeah, well, with us now is Hilary Wainwright, a British sociologist and political activist. Hilary, what do you make of what Tony Blair's had to say?
Well, I just think it's not accurate. I mean, I think that in my experience, I'm a fairly recent recruit to the Labour Party, and I just don't recognise what he's saying. I mean, the people on the left who supported Jeremy Corbyn are people who actually were the canvassers who were going out, you know, in all weathers, including as cold as this, and who in 2017 he conveniently ignores that election when Jeremy Corbyn, you know, completely contradicted what the commentators were saying and actually almost ousted Theresa May. Admittedly, she wasn't a communicator in the way that Boris Johnson sometimes is a communicator, a good communicator. But, you know, he did extremely well from the left, reaching the disenfranchised. I mean, the working class has changed a lot, obviously, since the days of Tony Blair. And it's not as if in his constituency, Sedgefield, Labour did very well. I mean, Labour has been ignoring the needs of working class people in places like Durham for a long time. And that's one of the reasons why, certainly in Durham, which I know a little, they lost there because of, you know, the neglect of the local council and Labour nationally after the destruction of the mines by Thatcher. So I don't agree with Tony Blair. I think he's just got his facts wrong.
But, I mean, you're citing the outcome of the 2017 election, which is valid. But I would say Tony Blair won 3 elections in a row and he knows how to get a result.
Yes, but, you know, you've got to remember he won after Thatcher and after the mounting discontent against Thatcher and then Blair.
Not just
and I
once. He won again and again.
Smith, but hang on a minute. On the eve of the 90s, before John Smith died, he was... Tragically, you know, but he was doing incredibly well in the opinion polls, 22% lead. I mean, so I think it wasn't in the case of Tony Blair. It was actually, you know, him being able to harvest discontent, which, you know, he wasn't unique in being able to harvest. John Smith would have done it perfectly well. John Smith actually was a unifier. I think the key thing, actually, which Tony Blair ignores, is that the reason why Labour did so badly in 1983. Which is often, you know, said to be the time when the left was the source of the disaster. was not because of the left, but because of disunity. It's disunity that people vote against. And similarly, in 2019, it was the disunity, it was the divisions that made the party so electable. The people that won were people like Harold Wilson and so on, who and John Smith, who maintained the party as a coalition, which is really what Tony Blair's trying to destroy, in my opinion.
Let's look at the man at the helm now. OK, Sir Keir Starmer, how do you rate him?
I'm not inspired. I think that he could have done a good job if he'd maintained many of the policies of the Corbyn era, which were popular after all. You know, the support for nationalisation, particularly of energy, but also water and so on, is a popular policy. If he'd maintained that and therefore maintained the energy of all the young people who joined under Corbyn, and then deployed his own particular tactics and demeanour, I think he could have done well. But he instead has maybe under the influence of Tony Blair's advisors, at any rate, has pursued this path of disunity, of attacking people on the left in a way which kind of reinforces the image of the party as, you know, in disarray and so on, and therefore not electable.
Hilary, I believe you started this conversation by saying you've just joined the Labour Party. Is that right? And I was just wondering.
I joined in 2015.
Right.
When Jeremy Corbyn became leader, but I've not left. I mean, I think there is, you know, there's a in my area in Hackney, you know, there are a lot of people who are really well rooted in the community, but actually one of them, a local residents community leader, has just been suspended, you know, and I think simply because she was trying to be a councillor and she's seen as from the left. So I actually think the party is now being kind of eroded again, when actually it had been built up under Jeremy Corbyn. And, you know, after all, the working class is young. I mean, it's changed and it's precarious. You know, it's not got stable jobs. It's cosmopolitan, it's black, it's female, it is diverse. And Jeremy Corbyn has been able to inspire those people and win them to the party. So he was adapting to changing circumstances in a way that I don't think Tony Blair is.
Yeah, but he did bring about Labour's worst election result since 1935.
Well, I don't think it was like him. He was at the helm, but he wasn't really in control. I mean, the party apparatus was still, you know, really under the control of people who came in under Tony Blair. And Jeremy Corbyn was constantly subject to attack from the parliamentary party. So he could hardly, you know, present himself as a unified leader, like a leader of a unified party. And I think that was the problem. I mean, I think we've got to analyse what went wrong. I think also it is, particularly in areas like Durham and many of the so-called red wall seats, it is to do with a very, you know, long-rooted legacy of Labour's failure. And that's quite widely accepted by psephologists.
Hilary, good to get your thoughts this morning. Thanks for joining us. Hilary Wainwright there, British sociologist and political activist who does not agree, I think it's fair to say, with Tony Blair's thoughts.
Yeah, if you're just joining us, well, we'll take you through what's making the morning front pages next. And also there have been concerns over the backlog of cancer cases in the NHS because of disruption caused by COVID. More on that next.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. Storm Arwen is arriving today and lasting overnight and into tomorrow. There's going to be very strong winds, damaging gusts in places, and for some a bit of snow as well. That's because the storm system is coming in from the north, so it's bringing with it cold air. But it's really the winds that are the greatest cause for concern, really picking up later today across northern Britain, but also down the west side. The winds will strengthen through the evening and overnight. So it's a blustery day. It's a grey, wet start across the south. Rain here, but increasingly across northern Scotland. Snow showers packing in, accompanied by those strong and gusty winds. That's going to make for some pretty hazardous travelling conditions, especially later on, say, along the A9. Some brightness developing later over northern England, maybe Northern Ireland, but it's going to feel cold as those winds continue to strengthen. And those winds, as I said, are the greatest cause for concern. We have a yellow warning covering much of northern and western Britain through today. Gusts of 55 to 65 miles an hour could easily cause some disruption, certainly to ferries. And an amber warning for northern and eastern Scotland, parts of northeast England. Gusts here are 75 miles an hour. That could cause some structural damage. Certainly the potential for issues to power supplies along with travel disruption. And the snow will keep going for a while over northern Scotland. In fact, this zone of wet weather as it sinks south will chiefly be of rain, but we could easily see some snow from that down to relatively low levels for a time during the course of the night. Very strong winds continuing overnight across Wales, southwest England, along with the east coast. Also, it's going to be a cold night and a cold start to the weekend. Warnings remain in place into Saturday. Still that northerly winds and still this mixture of rain, sleet and snow pushing southwards. As I said, any snow at low levels not expected to stick around, but you could see some. Further wintry showers keep going across the east. Elsewhere it does turn drier, but it will be cold. All the details of the Met Office weather warnings are on the Met Office website.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Right, let's take a look at what is making today's front pages then, starting with The Independent reporting Boris Johnson has rejected pleas to provide safe routes for refugees to reach the UK from Europe. This follows on from the deaths of 27 people trying to get across the English Channel in an inflatable dinghy.
The Telegraph leads with the absolute anguish of a husband who believes it was his wife who drowned in the English Channel migrant disaster. The man claims his wife's GPS signal suddenly disappeared when he was tracking her across the sea.
Guardian reports the news that South Africa and 5 more African countries have been added to the red list as a new COVID variant poses a significant threat. The new variant feared to be more transmissible and has the potential to evade immunity.
That story is also on the front page of The Times. Their headline, Variant Halts Travel to Africa. Ministers and scientists have become deeply concerned about the new variant found in South Africa and Botswana.
Yeah, the Mirror has an exclusive on DIY death boats as 4 flimsy vessels were found on the beaches in Kent yesterday.
And the Express headline claims UK troops are to patrol French beaches. This is border officers. It's part of a united effort, they say, to tackle the crisis, which, as you know, 27 people lost their lives trying to make that journey on Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be happening. The Mail reports that Boris Johnson has told Emmanuel Macron that he risks another Channel tragedy unless he stops blocking UK help to patrol French beaches. And British boots, the paper says, British border official troops, essentially, could reportedly be on the ground in France as early as Monday. That was, of course, before the announcement this morning that France has cancelled that meeting with Priti Patel because they are not happy. They call it unacceptable, the letter sent by Boris Johnson to Emmanuel Macron making those suggestions.
Let's look at the Metro now. They say, we just want to live like you. They've been speaking to a 23-year-old Iraqi who is determined to make the journey despite what happened on Wednesday.
Yeah, front page of The Eye, focusing on issues in the Channel. I know the risk. This is my only way to reach England. The words of one would-be migrant.
The Sun reports, very different story now. I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, saying the show can't afford to lose any more big names after Richard Madeley was forced to pull out because of health concerns. They're concerned there about Arlene and a naughty boy DJ as well.
Yeah, Madonna gets stuck under the bed. That's the front page of The Star after there were some risque photos published online after she apparently dropped her glasses under the bed.
Now, onto something very different. Macmillan Cancer Support have said that the scale of cancer care backlog still to hit the NHS is serious, and they're warning from further disruption from the pandemic this autumn and winter, and they could see the number of missing diagnoses increase further.
Yeah, with almost 50,000 missing cases, it only seems to be getting worse. To talk about this, joining us now is Minesh Patel, the head of policy at Macmillan Cancer Support. Minesh, very good morning to you. Can you give us an idea of the scale of the backlog?
Good morning. It's a really worrying picture that we're seeing with the analysis that we've published today. So we estimate that there are over 47,000 people who are currently missing a cancer diagnosis, and this is a year and a half into the pandemic. So this will include some people who may have started tests but are waiting for that diagnosis, but also people who are yet to come forward. And this is on top of a system that is already struggling to get people diagnosed and treated for cancer and to clear that cancer backlog quickly enough. We're hearing from staff on the front line who are just simply exhausted and maxed out. So it's a really worrying picture with the potential for more people to be entering the system. The government is planning a forthcoming elective recovery plan to deal with how they clear the backlog for non-urgent types of conditions. We really need this to prioritise cancer, to make sure that cancer services have the resources they need to get people diagnosed and treated as quickly as possible.
What kind of conversations are you having with people?
We're hearing from our support line of people living with cancer just how worried and anxious they are. People who have symptoms around cancer but are nervous about coming forward to their GP. For those people, would encourage people to speak to your GP. Your health services are still there for you. People tell us that they're worried about a late diagnosis, what this means for their chance of survival, their type of treatment. One case we heard was from Jackie and her husband, Mike. Mike was recently diagnosed with a brain tumour, but initially struggled to get his diagnosis due to disruption because of COVID and the pandemic. He's now been diagnosed, but is facing difficulties with his treatment, facing delays with that. So it's a really worrying picture and challenges that it could get worse unless government take the steps needed to make sure the resources are there to get people treated for cancer and unfortunately diagnosed in the first place. The forthcoming elective recovery plan is a chance to do this.
How much money do you calculate the government needs to invest in the NHS to try and clear this backlog?
We haven't put an exact figure on what needs to happen in terms of the exact figure, but what we're saying to government is that cancer needs to be a priority in its forthcoming plans. That means making sure that the money is there and that NHS and Trust have all they need in terms of staffing and resources, supporting them to access private capacity as well to help deal with the backlog. Longer term as well, we need to make sure that there's a plan to make sure our cancer workforce is fully funded, making sure that we've got the resources that we need. We estimate that England alone will need almost 3,400 nurses by 2030. So there's a need to look at what needs to happen in the short term. The elective recovery plan is a way to do that, but also longer term, making sure that our cancer workforce is shored up to ensure people get the care they need both now and in the future.
I wonder what advice you can give to people watching at home. I mean, yesterday we did a story about the fact that I think it's 68% of men can't identify the symptoms of prostate cancer. So we're doing this story and lots of people were messaging in saying, well, I've had the advice, right, you've told me the symptoms, I should go to my GP. I can't get a GP appointment. What do those people do?
We appreciate that it's a really hard time for people, and you mentioned prostate cancer there. That's one of the types of cancer which is particularly down in terms of diagnosis. They're down by 23%. We would urge people to still come forward and to persist. with getting that appointment with their GP. We know GPs are busy, but they are working as hard as possible to get people treated. And if you do have signs of cancer, your GP should be making the time to make sure you are seeing face-to-face. Anybody who is worried or struggling to get that GP appointment, would encourage them to speak to Macmillan. We have advisors that people can speak to on the phone. We have information on our website and also an online community. So the message I want to say is, if you do have suspected symptoms of cancer, if you're worried, please do speak to your GP and access the health service that are available for you.
Minish, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. Minish Patel there from Macmillan Cancer Support. It is 8:33 now. Celtic legend Bertie Auld passed away just over a week ago, and Glasgow has come together to pay tribute to one of the most important players in the club's history.
Now, his funeral will take place at 12 noon today in St Mary of the Assumption in the heart of the city. Before the funeral cortege will pass by Celtic Park and down Celtic Way. The club will broadcast his funeral live on YouTube for fans who wish to watch the service remotely.
Yeah, for live coverage of today's service and the tributes being paid from across Scotland is GB News' Scotland reporter Davy Donaldson. Davy, for those who aren't aware, just how important is Bertie Auld to Celtic fans and really the people of Scotland?
Yeah, I think, you look at Bertie Auld, 12 years and 2 spells at Celtic, so a hugely popular character amongst Celtic fans, no doubt about that, and there will be thousands here to pay tribute when that cortege passes here at 1:30, as you said earlier. Then there will be thousands of people lining along Celtic Way. I'm just standing here on Celtic Way, just outside the front doors of Celtic Football Club, as you can see. And just off to my right, we've got the big screen up already, so fans will be able to see the service, which is a great token gesture by the club, being able to, so that fans can actually see it and pay their tributes to, what was one of Celtic's great players. He won 5 Scottish League titles, he won 3 Scottish Cups, 4 League Cups, and not to mention, of course, Celtic being the first British team to win the European Cup, and Bertie Auld was in that side in 1967, which beat Inter Milan 2-1 in the final. So, a really pivotal character, a pivotal player in Celtic's history, and certainly one that was very fondly remembered, I have to say. I've interviewed him a couple of times myself, and to say he was sharp as a tack would be an understatement, because he certainly always had you laughing and in stitches, and very famous for his storytelling and his one-liners, and certainly a hugely popular player for Celtic. And you can see behind me the floral tributes already piling up, and understandably so. We've got Rangers scarves there as well across the other side of the city. So as you can see, people are getting set up here. Obviously the service is going to take place at St Mary's at Calais, which a number of former Lisbon Lions players have had their service there, including Stevie Chalmers, which I was actually at. There'll be all sorts of players. Obviously Celtic Football Club squad will be down there today. The rest of the Lisbon Lions, the surviving Lisbon Lions, will also be there too, and among many other greats in Scottish football, to pay their tributes to Bertie.
How are people feeling?
People obviously feeling a huge sense of loss. He was a very popular character, as I said, in the East End of Glasgow, and not just, for Celtic, but I think he kind of crossed the divide in terms of, he was a popular character just across Scottish football. He was a guy, I said, that was a very funny man, great for his one-liners, great at telling stories, and people laughed at that. And just as a start now, the music comes on. But he was a very popular character. A lot of Celtic fans who find this very emotional today, and understandably so. As they start to get drowned out here. But it will be a very emotional day for Celtic, not just for the club, but obviously for the Lisbon Lions as well, the surviving Lisbon Lions, the likes of Jim Craig and people like that. It'll be a hugely a sad day, for them, because they've lost one of their teammates, Bobby Lennox, people like that. So, it will be a sad day for fans, but a day to really remember one of Celtic's true great players.
Yeah, indeed. A Scottish football legend and one of Celtic's own. Thank you, Davy. That's our Scotland reporter, Davy Donaldson, previewing the funeral of Bertie Auld, which is later today.
It's 8:37 now, still to come here before 9 on the programme. Will you be indulging in Black Friday sales?
You already have.
I did make one purchase already. And we're going to be speaking to Mark Nolder, who's the head of payments at Nationwide, on what could be the biggest Black Friday to date. That's coming up.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Ongoing supply chain issues for things like turkeys, toys and tech. Could this Black Friday be Britain's best chance to secure our Christmas gifts?
Experts say this could be the biggest spending spree in the last few Black Fridays, despite the lack of big discounts. And recent analysis of prices shows a drop in discounted items, and the money off high street ticket items has also dropped compared to last year. Well, Mark Nadler is the head of payments at Nationwide and joins us now. Some of the really big retailers, they're not really doing Black Friday this year.
Morning. I think you're right. I think we're seeing a real mix of some retailers really offering the deals, and some that maybe don't need to attract, are not offering as much as we've seen in previous years.
Yeah, I think what we have seen is spending habits changing, and we're buying a bit earlier, though, aren't we? So people might try and use the opportunity today to get some Christmas presents in. Maybe they're nervous about, supply chain issues. They're not going to be able to get all the things they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we've seen over the last few years is, Black Friday 5 years ago was just Black Friday, whereas now these offers start kind of 2-3 weeks before even now. So actually Black Friday becomes, a much longer period. So it's not just about today. Today absolutely will be our busiest day of the year. We firmly believe that. That's been a trend we've seen over the last sort of 5-6 years, and we expect that to continue today. But like you said, it is the first day of shopping for many people today, Christmas shopping. So, both in the high street and online, we expect to see a very busy day.
I guess the general message is that there's no such thing as January sales. Black Friday lasts 3 weeks. There's just this kind of 2-month period leading up to the end of the year when we're told to buy stuff we don't really need.
Yeah, absolutely. And our survey kind of suggests that I think 4 in 10 people will make purchases they regret today. They see an offer they're tempted by and then actually realise after the day they don't actually need it. So there's definitely some of that today. We expect to see some of those purchases made today.
Then returned. Talk us through, there's this interesting period of time we're in now. If you buy things now, you can take them back well after Christmas, longer than the 30-day period, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are obviously looking to attract people into store, whether it's online or in the high street. And you've actually got longer periods of time because they want people to buy early. Historically, it was that sort of 30 days, and it was you had to buy in December to get stuff back in January. Whereas now that's a much bigger period. So obviously, people attract people to buy much earlier and plan much earlier in the year.
Do you see a lot of people buying lots and then having that sort of second thought and returning quite a majority of the stuff they bought?
Yeah, absolutely. I said like 4 in 10 people make kind of regretful purchases today. So we expect a lot of those purchases to be returned over the next couple of weeks when they really don't actually need it.
It's also just more complicated things like buying clothes right now because of coronavirus. It's been more difficult to try things on, so you're tempted to have to buy a whole load of stuff, take it home, see if it fits, and bring it back home. Your bedroom sort of becomes the shop changing room.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw that a lot last year when obviously the high street was completely closed and you couldn't go and try stuff on, and people were ordering like 4 or 5 of the same outfit, different sizes, and then they said return it a week or so later. So hopefully this year the high street's slightly more open so people can go and try stuff on and maybe get the right size rather than buy 3 or 4 outfits just for one night out.
Yeah, Mark, appreciate your insight this morning. Thank you, Mark Nadler there from Nationwide.
Let's give you an overview of what else is making the headlines today, though. A travel ban's going to be enforced on 6 African nations over concerns over a new COVID-19 variant that officials say is the worst one we've ever seen. From midday, flights from South Africa, Namibia and 4 other countries in Africa will be suspended, and all the countries will be added to the red list. That red list that was sort of abandoned but empty. It's now got 6 countries on it. Elsewhere, the EU has said it wants to stop air travel from southern Africa, also to try and stop the spread of that new COVID-19 variant.
The Prime Minister has written to French President Emmanuel Macron setting out a 5-point plan to prevent channel crossings. Now, this letter that he sent, the measures include joint maritime patrols in each other's territorial waters. But it's now reportedly led to the cancellation of a meeting between Home Secretary Priti Patel and her French counterpart due to take place on Sunday. The French calling the letter unacceptable.
Urgent actions needed to tackle the problem of youth unemployment, according to a new Lords report that's calling for reforms to careers guidance and further education funding. It says the pandemic was a perfect storm for youth unemployment, with 70% of job losses among the under-25s.
In sport, Rangers' new boss Giovanni van Bronckhorst had a good first game in charge, leading his side into the Europa League knockout stages after a 2-0 victory over Sparta Prague.
Wasn't such good news for Celtic as they lost 3-2. The Scottish side now find themselves out of Europe and the worst defensive record in the competition this season.
Who did they lose to?
I don't know.
Bayer Leverkusen. Surely if there is ever an appropriate club for Black Friday, it's Bayer Leverkusen. And today's weather, rain clearing south, then colder with sunny spells and scattered heavy showers, becoming very windy across western and northern areas with stormy conditions for parts of north and east Scotland. There's going to be heavy snow for high ground. Basically, it's going to be much windier and much colder this weekend.
Well, this week, and the lead up to this week, actually, we've been spending time in Northern Ireland to get the very latest on the protocol negotiations and trying to work out why there does seem to be such little progress being made. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, spoke to Brandon Lewis, who's the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, about the latest round of negotiations with the EU, and also asked him just what progress was being made.
Secretary, I think, first of all, there's much speculation about when the British government, or if the British government, might trigger Article 16. You say the conditions are there. Why do you say that?
Well, as we said back in July, that's absolutely yes. We think the conditions to trigger Article 16 have been met, whether you look at the disruption to society here in Northern Ireland, the disruption to everyday lives of communities, diversion of trade. There's a range of issues. We are confident the conditions are met. We haven't triggered Article 16 because we don't want to. What we want to do is find an agreement with the EU. That's why we published the command paper. EU have published their proposals, and those are the negotiations that Lord Frost is leading right now.
And so, as much as I understand it, it's not that you want to get rid of the protocol altogether. You just want to change how it's implemented. Is that right?
Effectively, yes. Look, the core principles of the protocol, we've said, Lord Frost, the Prime Minister, myself, we've all said there needs to be an agreement between us and the EU because we recognise that products moving into the EU from the UK need to be properly dealt with. What we're saying is protocol was never intended to stop products from Great Britain moving to Northern Ireland that are being consumed and used in Northern Ireland going through the same processes as if they were going into the single market. And that's what we need to rectify.
But what I can understand is because lots of unionists don't like the protocol itself. How are you going to satisfy that section of unionism that doesn't like the protocol if the British position is that actually the protocol should remain, it just needs to be changed in how it's implemented.
Well, I'd say two things. It's not just unionism. Actually, it's the whole of Northern Ireland who suffer at the moment because of the way the protocol is working. And I had a meeting myself with Lord Froston, the First and Deputy First Minister, Sinn Féin and DUP, on Wednesday this week, where Michelle O'Neill herself was also saying we need to resolve the issues of the protocol, we need to do it soon. So this is something that affects the whole community of Northern Ireland. That's why we as the UK government want to rectify this. In terms of why any particular person has an issue with it, whether it's a unionist having an issue or somebody who comes from a nationalist point of view, we want to make sure we fix the issues. It's the reason why they don't like the protocol that we want to resolve. If we can resolve those issues and actually get a solution that works for Northern Ireland, so as products move as they've always done without any risk to the single market, and let's be frank, as we've seen over the last year, the single market hasn't been at risk, but the UK internal market and the market for people in Northern Ireland has been damaged. And it's right, as part of the UK, that we rectify that.
In saying that, largely, and we've been talking to businesses all week, they actually are in favour of the protocol. They quite like it. Public support seems to be behind the protocol. I mean, lots of people do think it's a really good thing.
Well, if you get the protocol working the way it was envisaged, that it deals with products moving into the single market, then it gives Northern Ireland an opportunity, because it means Northern Ireland is an integral part of the UK internal market and has full access as part of the UK, as well as access to the EU market. That gives it a competitive advantage. But at the moment, that's not working. And actually, one of the things I would say, I just slightly challenge what you said. When I talk to the business community, the entire business community, pretty much, not all, but pretty much all, the vast majority, over 90%, say to us, the protocol at the moment isn't working. The EU proposals don't go anywhere near far enough to resolve the issues they are having with products moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. We've got to rectify that. If we can get that done, then we've got a structure that can work.
But the ultimate question is, what is the point of triggering Article 16? Because all it leads, first of all, is to more negotiations. They're already happening. And second of all, there's going to have to be a deal anyway. What does trigger Article 16 actually achieve?
Well, I think this comes back to my opening comment, is we haven't triggered Article 16 because we don't want to. We want to get a resolution by agreement.
Why would it ever be on the table?
Well, there is a point at which we will have to take a view. Are the negotiations moving forward in a positive way that means we are going to get a resolution that works, that's got some certainty, that's got sustainability, both for businesses and the communities here in Northern Ireland? If we can't do that, then we've got to look at what do. We can't leave things as they are. It's just not sustainable, whether it's from a constitutional point of view for Stormont sustainability, as we're all aware, the tensions that it creates at a political level, but actually for people on the ground and businesses on the ground in Northern Ireland. Therefore, so triggering Article 16, if we need to, and for us it is an absolute last resort, as I say, certainty is much better by agreement, but if we have to trigger Article 16, what that does do is it starts a process. You're absolutely right. It's again the reason why it's not the solution in itself, it's the start of a process. But it does allow us to give some certainty to businesses and to people that we will ensure that products can move from Great Britain to Northern Ireland in a flexible and fluid way, in the way it was always intended to do. Yes, it does mean, though, it's part of another process to get to an ultimate conclusion.
Because isn't that
but there is a point at which we have to make a decision around doing what's right for the people in Northern Ireland. We won't shy away from that.
But I'm not entirely sure triggering Article 16 provides any form of stability. In fact, it raises even more questions. It creates even more instability.
Well, it does allow us to actually disregard parts of the protocol that are causing problems in terms of the way the checks are being implemented between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which means we can get that flow of product back through. We've got over 200 businesses in Great Britain, we know, who have stopped supplying Northern Ireland. That's not good for Northern Ireland, that's not good for Great Britain, it's not good for the UK, and we need to make sure we rectify that. If we need to trigger Article 16 to get that process working, we will do it, but we'd much rather come to an agreement with the EU. That's much more sustainable and gives certainty for business as well.
No idea when it's going to happen?
Well, look,
how long do you give the negotiations?
Well, I think one of the things, I'll be very, very clear about this. I think one of the things we've all learned from the past, if you look at what's happened over the last since 2016, is setting floors and ceilings in public doesn't help. These negotiations need to be done in private, have the space to have proper detailed negotiations. Lord Frost, Prime Minister, myself, the team will look at those discussions, see how they're going, and we will make a decision about, at the right point, around whether we are coming to a conclusion that's good for Northern Ireland or whether we as UK government need to trigger Article 16. As I say, we won't shy away from it. This can't go on for too much longer, but we've got to give space to those negotiations.
Yeah, and that's the question, isn't it? How much longer is this going to go on for? Will the government trigger Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol, which some are calling the nuclear option? The negotiations are ongoing. We've been across it throughout the week here on GBNews, haven't we?
Yeah, you can catch that full interview later on the channel. But also today, Paul, if you're not going to mention it, I will. Paul has spent a great deal of time putting together a documentary, spent a lot of time in Northern Ireland. The problem with the protocol, that's going to be released all on YouTube in full later on today.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And I think they're going to play it in full as well in On the Money this afternoon. So look out for that.
Now, Teesside steel company Paraloy has secured a £15 million funding package, enabling it to fulfil more exports than it has ever in its 90-year history. The money is from Santander UK. It's supported by the government's UK Export Finance, which provides export credit.
Our cameras join the Tees Valley Mayor Ben Houchin for a private tour of the Millsborough facility. And as our North East of England reporter Rachel Sweeney tells us, it's good news for the people there.
A team of 350 working from 3 factories producing high-end metal for a global market. This is Paraloy. A £15 million funding package enables Paraloy to fulfil the most exports in its 90-year history, with shipments to North America, the Middle East and Asia Pacific. But it's Teesside at the heart of the operation.
Teesside has a rich history of metal, so we've in the past, we've had a long history of the right kind of skills in the area. It is a concern that we invest more in skills and training in the years to come with all the work that's going on. We've got over 30-odd vacancies right now in the business, so we are really keen on developing that side of the business. But the Teesside area has a good mix of fabrication, welding, machining, and all that kind of metallurgically related products.
They've opened 2 additional sites and recruited more than 70 new staff so far. They're still looking for another 35 people, but will the jobs go to locals?
95% of everybody we bring in is regional, so from Newcastle down to sort of the North Yorkshire areas, and that sort of catchment area is where most people come from. I just love the frankness and the hard work ethic of the northern region. So it's been a great move for us.
The northeast of England is truly a fascinating place to be at the moment. We are seeing record deals from businesses right across the globe. People want to set up camp right here on Teesside and across the northeast. It is stabilising our local economy. It is bringing in jobs, and the Paraloy deal is just one more cherry on the cake. The Tees Valley Mayor Ben Houchin has been visiting the site, and he says this is only great news for the people who live here.
Well, it's incredible. I want more businesses like Paraloy in Teesside. I mean, they are doing some fantastic stuff, and it's great to see them access the UK Export Finance. So any business out there that is looking to export in the amazing way that Paraloy does right here, then they need to access that, because it's allowed them to take on more orders, be able to access new markets, grow their business, but also more importantly as well, grow their headcount, create jobs, but good quality, well-paid jobs, the types of jobs we need in this area.
From a low-wage service sector economy to an area thriving on high skills and global exports, the world is watching Teesside.
That's it from us this morning. Isabel Webster and Ellie Costello will be with you from 6 tomorrow. Up next, Tom Harwood is here with the briefing, so very much looking forward to that. But first, let's find out just how cold the weather is going to get this weekend.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. Storm Arwen is arriving today and lasting overnight and into tomorrow. There's going to be very strong winds, damaging gusts in places, and for some a bit of snow as well. That's because the storm system is coming in from the north, so it's bringing with it cold air. But it's really the winds that are the greatest cause for concern, really picking up later today across northern Britain, but also down the west side. The winds will strengthen through the evening and overnight. So it's a blustery day. It's a grey, wet start across the south. Rain here, but increasingly across northern Scotland, snow showers packing in, accompanied by those strong and gusty winds. That's going to make for some pretty hazardous travelling conditions, especially later on, say, along the A9. Some brightness developing later over northern England, maybe Northern Ireland, but it's going to feel cold as those winds continue to strengthen. And those winds, as I said, are the greatest cause for concern. We have a yellow warning covering much of northern and western Britain through today. Gusts of 55 to 65 miles an hour could easily cause some disruption, certainly to ferries. And an amber warning for northern and eastern Scotland, parts of northeast England. Gusts here of 75 miles an hour. That could cause some structural damage. Certainly the potential for issues to power supplies along with travel disruption. and the snow will keep going for a while over northern Scotland. In fact, this zone of wet weather as it sinks south will chiefly be of rain, but we could easily see some snow from that down to relatively low levels for a time during the course of the night. Very strong winds continuing overnight across Wales and southwest England, along with the east coast. Also, it's going to be a cold night and a cold start to the weekend. Warnings remain in place into Saturday. Still that northerly wind and still this mixture of rain, sleet and snow pushing southwards. As I said, any snow at low levels not expected to stick around, but you could see some. Further wintry showers keep going across the east. Elsewhere it does turn drier, but it will be cold. All the details of the Met Office weather warnings are on the Met Office website.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks.